Those who have been in a coma, what was it like? I can only compare it to when you're little and wake up at a friend's house and don't know where you are. I was in a coma for 2 months after a bad car accident. It wasn't medically induced. It was thanks to brain damage. When I woke up I was alone in the hospital room and had no clue what happened or why I was there. I had a neck brace on due to a broken neck, so I figured something was wrong with my neck but was unsure how or what happened. For some reason I thought I was 60 years old. I was in my 20s. I was paranoid and scared but didn't know why I was there. I used context clues to figure out I was in the hospital. It was frightening. After about 5 minutes I decided to go back to sleep. 2 months of sleep wasn't quite long enough. I wasn't in one for a long, just under a week. While I was in the coma, I didn't remember a thing. When I came out of it, I just remember hearing my mom yell to the attending, "He's up." Then I woke up with a bunch of white coats in the room. I was super stiff and incredibly confused. Oddly enough, I kept having vivid dreams of myself in the coma after the fact. Still have them to this day. They're almost like an out-of-body experience because I can see myself laying in the bed with people around me.
The time I beat the crap out of a pick-me girl. I am a professional boxer. My husband has also been training in combat sports for over a decade. After we got together, he took me to his training gym, where I met his female training partner, who had been training with him for many years. She was the biggest pick-me I've seen in my life. On the first day, I stood quietly in a skirt, watching them train. She came over and warmly asked, "Why don't you train with us?" He likes girls who are into sports. I smiled and replied, "No, thanks." During the training, she constantly partnered with him and chatted with him during breaks. My husband, then boyfriend, ignored her and walked over to me, asking if I was bored waiting. I shook my head and told him that he looked really handsome while boxing. She followed us and put her arm around his shoulder, looking at me and saying, "We are all about violence. You probably don't like all this fighting and killing." She then positioned herself between me and my husband, turned away from me, and started asking him some boxing technique questions. My husband was getting a bit annoyed at this point, but he didn't want to be rude, so he told her they could discuss it later after the break. She turned around, seeming to notice me for the first time, and said, "Ah, I see. You probably don't understand what we're talking about and find it boring, right?" I remained silent with a cold expression on my face. Later, my husband decided to change partners during the break. She exaggeratedly said to me, "Are you really jealous of this too? It's just a normal training process. We don't mind male or female partners. We've been training like this for over a decade. Don't be so petty." I was getting infuriated, but I couldn't find the right way to confront her. My husband noticed my upset and said he would stop training and go home. In another encounter at the supermarket, she once again pushed me aside and held on to my husband, chatting incessantly. I decided to walk away to buy some snacks. My husband finally got away from her, saying he needed to check on what I was doing. She followed him, saw the snacks in my hands, and exclaimed, "Oh, how can you eat such junk food? It's so unhealthy. We boxers have a strict discipline and never eat this stuff." I replied, "I love to eat what I like." Then she started messaging my husband from time to time. I was naturally angry and told my husband not to respond to her messages. He was quite helpless, saying, "She's asking me about training techniques, I can't just ignore her. We've known each other as teammates for so many years. Every time she saw me at the gym, she made a point to say, 'We only talk about training in our messages, don't worry about it.'" During training, she would cling to my husband, touching his shoulder and waist, using the excuse of correcting his training movements. My patience was nearly at its limit. Once, when I accompanied my husband to the gym and changed into sportswear, intending to train with them, she started her act again. Since she had been training at this gym for many years, she always led the warm-up exercises. She deliberately made the warm-up more difficult and intense than usual, making everyone exhausted. Gasping for breath, she ran over to me and proudly said, "This intensity is just ordinary for us. The actual training will be even tougher. It's normal for you to find it hard at the beginning. You'll get used to it with more practice." I smiled and replied, "I'm not tired. I just think this warm-up is not scientifically sound." She got angry and pulled my husband's arm, saying, "She doesn't know anything but acts like she knows everything." My husband patted her arm down and said, "My girlfriend is a professional boxer." She looked confused, and I said, "I also do boxing. Today, I'll use one of your punching bags." She was surprised and excited, suggesting we spar in a real fight that day, but I didn't want to do that and told her I didn't feel like it. She began insulting me, saying, "I get it, most girls who do boxing just want to look good, they are timid and weak, afraid of real combat. Very few girls are like me, tough like a man, not afraid of getting hit." Ha ha ha. I got annoyed and decided to fight her to shut her up. I told her, "Fine, let's do it." She condescendingly said, "Don't worry, I'll take it easy on you." My husband saw that I was genuinely upset and didn't know how to deal with her constant pestering. He helped me put on my boxing gloves and mouthguard and gently said, "Don't get too angry, just open up your heart and spar, but be gentle." When the fight started, she came at me like a mad woman, throwing heavy punches. What happened to take it easy on me? I dodged and evaded, occasionally asking her, "Why are you so aggressive?" She ignored me and kept on attacking with full force. It was evident that she wanted to bully the weak. If I were a complete beginner, she would have beaten me badly. She had gone too far, and I had had enough. I didn't want to engage with amateurs, lowering myself to their level, or disregard martial principles. But when someone provokes continuously and tries to snatch my man, even animals have territorial disputes, let alone humans. So I stopped being defensive and started to counterattack. Although I didn't go all out, I did hit her hard enough to make it painful. She couldn't last a minute against me. My personality may be quiet, but I am a boxer. Martial artists should cultivate their moral character, and when faced with strength, they should respond with strength and be willing to challenge those stronger than themselves, rather than taking advantage of the weak. She had trained for a long time and thought she could bully others. So, I just gave her a small lesson. Since she wanted to act like a tough woman, and one of the boys, I dealt with her like how I would treat a guy. After I gave her a beating, she finally stopped bothering me. I'll update everyone if she ever does again.
What phrase is a dead giveaway that the person talking is a piece of shit? Do you know who I am? Also C. Do you know who my dad is? All my exes are crazy is priming you to not talk to the exes, so you don't find out the person is a jerk. What's the common denominator here? This is just how I am, was raised, was taught. You've ruined my day when somebody else is upset for good reason. Looks for things I say to see if I'm a piece of shit. My trauma is worse.
Man, what would you do if every man but you disappeared? I woke up one morning to find myself in a world that felt like a Twilight Zone episode. Every man, except for me, had disappeared. Just imagine the feeling of isolation, the eerie silence that enveloped everything. It was both thrilling and terrifying all at once. Now, let me tell you, being the only man left on this planet had its perks. Suddenly, I was in demand like never before. Women from every corner of the world were clamoring for my attention, seeking my companionship, and yearning for my touch. It was like living in a never-ending wet dream. But amidst all the fun and excitement, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of unease. I began to understand the importance of male presence, the balance that was now lost. Suddenly, the world lacked direction and felt disorganized. The responsibilities that men usually took on were now mine alone. I became the protector, the provider, and the decision-maker. It was a heavy burden to bear, especially when I realized the world had turned into a brutal, survival-driven place. The strong preyed on the weak, and violence lurked around every corner. I learned to navigate this new world with caution, never fully letting my guard down. I formed alliances with a few women who shared my sense of responsibility, and together we built a community of strength and resilience. We had to fight tooth and nail, not just against the dangers around us but also against our own inner demons. As the days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, something unexpected started to occur. Women began to change. No longer restricted by societal norms and expectations, they reinvented themselves. With the absence of men, they tapped into their full potential, embracing their power and strength. But it wasn't just the women who changed. Even I, the soul man, grew and evolved. I learned to see the world through a different lens, no longer bound by the limitations of my gender. I discovered aspects of my own personality that had been suppressed for far too long, free to explore my full potential. But then, one day, something strange happened. I noticed a faint buzzing noise in the distance, like a low-pitched hum. I followed the sound and soon found myself standing in front of an old abandoned warehouse. I peered inside and saw a group of men, all of them looking just like me. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but it was quickly replaced by confusion. Who were these men? How had they gotten here? I was determined to find out the answers to these questions, and so I ventured inside. I soon discovered that these men were all from different countries and different walks of life. They all had one thing in common though: they had all been transported to this strange new world in the same way I had. We were all part of an experiment, a mysterious experiment that had been conducted by a powerful and mysterious entity. We were all part of a grand plan, and it was up to us to figure out what that plan was. And so, here I am, standing on the precipice of a new era. The world as we knew it has forever changed, adapting to the void left by the missing men. But there is still an undercurrent of uncertainty, a nagging feeling that there is more to this story than meets the eye. As I venture towards the horizon, driven by an insatiable hunger for answers, I find myself stumbling upon a hidden secret. A clue, buried deep within the depths of time, offering a glimpse into the truth behind the disappearance of all men. It's a discovery that could shape the fate of humanity, forever altering the course of our existence. But I have a feeling that this is only the beginning. I'm sure there are more secrets to uncover, more questions to be answered, and more mysteries to be solved. I'm ready to face whatever lies ahead, and I'm eager to see what the future holds. With every step I take, I'm one step closer to the truth. Who knows what I'll find?
Guys, what made you realize, this girl is definitely not into me? We flirted for several weeks, hung out every day, I kept feeling a closer and closer connection, but due to circumstances I could not control, we were never alone enough together for me to test it. Had some friends plan a camping trip and I invited her and she said yes. I even specifically told her there's gonna be 2 couples there, so we're gonna be in a tent, just the 2 of us. She said yeah, she knows. Get to the trip, we have a few drinks and I ask her if she wants to take a walk with me to look at stars. I get it, it's corny. Shut up. Once we're a little away from everyone I tell her how much I like her and attempt to go in for a kiss. Nope, sorry, name, am not what you're looking for, shattered me, utterly gutted. Asked her to senior prom. She said yes, but when we got there she ditched me to hang out with another guy she liked. Wasn't too bad though, cause I danced with another girl who I got along better with. What disturbing thing did you find out about someone after they died? My great-grandma and her brothers were notorious in Watertown, Massachusetts for their check fraud and forgery schemes. Oh, the things you find out about the woman who would make you hot cocoa. That my mother had an affair and I'm the product. Man involved has had no idea I exist. Didn't find out from my mother because she died when I was 15. Found out at the age of 21 from my aunt. I had a neighbor several years ago, divorced, old guy. Was really nice to people. He always bought candy for all the kids in the neighborhood, nothing shady. He died 10 years ago. His son told us that the reason he was nice to his kids was because he lost 3 of his 5 children while they were below 10. Not disturbing, just very sad.
What secret did you vow to never tell your spouse? I'm gay and my wife doesn't know my wife and I have been together 9 years, married for 7. But I know that I'm gay. I've never been attracted to another woman other than her, but I've been attracted to lots of men. I've never been in an intimate relationship with a man, but if I wasn't with my wife, I know I would be. My preferences when I'm by myself have only ever been over men lol, but it's strange. My wife is my soulmate in the most absolute sense. It doesn't matter that she's a woman, I'm so in love with her mind and her heart and her as a human being that she could literally be in any body and I would love and worship her. Even being with her intimately is incredible because it's her. I know this makes no sense and that's why I can't tell her. She would think she isn't enough because she isn't a man. But she's the other half of my soul and I could never ever hurt her or be without her. I think every inch of her body is beautiful and she lights me up like no other human ever could. She completes me and I know I won't need to be with anyone else, but I know no one will believe that. Is it possible to be gay except one woman? If so, that's what I am. So after I posted here last week I did a lot of research and I'm fairly certain I'm bisexual with a strong physical preference for men, but demisexual when it comes to women. I've never had deep feelings for anyone except my wife, male or female, but when I met her and started to develop those feelings, the physical attraction strongly followed. I obviously don't plan on ever finding out if it would be the same with other women. Nor do I plan on being with men, despite what some people said. Either way, these labels don't really matter in themselves because I won't be exploring it, but I did decide I wanted to tell my wife and they helped me articulate it. So I sort of blurted it all out to her over the weekend. I told her I'm probably bisexual/demisexual, and initially wasn't sure whether to tell her she's the only woman I've ever been intimately attracted to, but I did in the end. I told her my love for her wasn't defined by her gender, but that she's my soulmate and I'm truly in love with her heart, her mind and her body. Those of you who said she probably knew more than I thought were right. She was sort of surprised but not entirely. She said she assumed I wasn't straight because she had a vibe, not sure what that means, and she'd noticed I'd never talked about how other women were attractive. I think she was surprised that my preference other than her skews so significantly towards men, but she knows I don't want to pursue it so she said it doesn't matter. She also told me she thinks she's on the bisexual spectrum too somewhere herself, though likewise has no plans to explore it. But it's such a relief to have it all out in the open with her. I told her I'd be more than happy to go to therapy with her if she wants help processing, and she said that's not necessary right now but it's good to know it's an option in the future. My family cut contact with me for 9 years because of a lie. Now it's my turn for revenge. My cousin accused me of something I didn't do, and my family were so disgusted by me that they cut contact. I just feel so lost on what to do. I grew up in what was probably the most normal of normal households. My parents worked a lot, but still managed to care for me and my 3 older sisters. We were never super close as a family, but never had any issues either. The same goes for my extended family. They always lived a few hours away, but we saw each other during summer holidays or Christmas and always got along great. But when we got older we naturally grew apart as everyone had their own lives. I'm 31 now. In 2014, when I was 22 and attending uni, I got a phone call from my mother that turned my life upside down. I remember I didn't even answer at first, because I was gaming with friends. But she called again immediately after the first call. This was an unwritten rule in the family. If you call twice like that, it's important. Like someone died important. So when she called again, I excused myself and answered, only to hear chaos in the other end. Like people were arguing. But when my mom realized I had answered, it sounded like she went to another room and closed the door. I just asked what was going on and I heard she was crying. My memory of this conversation is a bit blurry, but she basically asked me if I had something to confess to regarding Eve. Eve is my cousin on my mom's side and is 7 years younger than me, 15 at the time. At that point, I hadn't even seen Eve for several years. I just said no and asked what this is about. She just cried even harder and started accusing me of sexually assaulting Eve back when we were children. That Eve had told everything to my sister, and that my sister told my mother and my aunt. Eve had told them that back when she was 9, and I 16, she'd been playing in my room when I came in and started feeling her under her clothes and kissing her. My mother screamed at me to say something, but I couldn't even speak. It was all so absurd. I remember thinking that must be some bad joke. The last thing I remember saying was that it's not true and that Eve is lying. But then my mom goes on saying that Eve gave such a detailed description of where and how. Then she kept asking something like, "Did you do this? Did you do this?" And I just screamed back at her no. Each time. It all ended with my mom putting me on speaker and both my mom and dad saying that they don't want anything to do with me and never to contact them again. 2 of my sisters texted me later that day, pretty much saying that I'm disgusting and then blocked me. I know it's weird, but after that call I went to have a long shower. To this day I still don't know why I did that. After calming down, I started calling and texting everyone, even Eve. No one answered and the ones who hadn't blocked my number by then quickly did so. The only thing I heard back was from my father who texted me to stop contacting them and that they need to heal. That was 9 years ago and I haven't spoken to anyone in my family since that day. To say this effed me up is an understatement. I was living in a haze for weeks after that and hardly ate at all. It didn't help that this was right before I was supposed to defend my bachelor's thesis and was already stressed out. Luckily my co-writer sensed something was up and saved me by controlling the conversation so that I got the easy parts. Without him I am sure I would have failed. Needless to say, no one came to my graduation. Then started the worst period of my life. I spent the first year expecting the cops to knock on my door and arresting me for sexual abuse. I didn't land any jobs, just living off my saved money. I drank a lot and did oxy. I also grew resentful and violent. The only reason I didn't hurt anyone is because no one was around. My neighbor called the cops on me once after I had smashed a glass, but I managed to convince the officers that I had just dropped it, and they went away since there were no others inside my apartment. Instead of sleeping, I spent my nights planning how I could hurt Eve and make sure no one ever found out. Even thinking how I could actually do the things she'd accused me of, but much worse. I know, I'm not proud of that. I landed my first real job in my field in late 2015. Only then did things start to improve. I focused all my time on my job, as it gave me something normal to do. Recovery was a slow process, but I drank less, sober now for 4+ years, and smiled more. I lived cheap and earned good money, so I made a point of buying myself a nice gift for my birthdays, a VR headset, a motorcycle, Lego etc. And last year I moved from my shitty apartment and bought a small house. It was an old dream of mine to have my own garage and a garden to care for. This has boosted me even more. So my life is okay now. I still have problems. I've been on antidepressants for the last few years and while they help, it's not in a happy way. They simply remove the dark thoughts and replace them with dead ones. My trust in other people is close to non-existent. I've tried dating, but only been on 2 dates with 2 different women. It's really hard to speak like a normal person when it comes down to it. And what would I tell a potential partner when she asked about my family? Oh, you know, they accused me of a heinous crime and we're not talking anymore. But I didn't do it, I swear. My field is very male-dominated, so the only woman I really speak to is my therapist, who I like a lot. If this text was difficult to follow, I apologize. I'm not good with words on the best of days, and I started rambling a bit when it all came back to me. It's already getting long, so I will fast forward to my current issue. A few days ago, I received a text from my mother. It felt unreal and I was scared to open it at first, so I just stared at the notification for hours before opening it. Yesterday, another text followed. Translated, they basically say, Text 1, Hi, it's been so long since we talked. We miss you and want to know how you're doing. Here she writes a long text about my sisters and how my nieces and nephews are getting big. I didn't even know I was an uncle. Know that we love you and always will. Mom and Dad text too, Hi, we understand if you don't want to talk to us after what happened, but please listen. Last month, the subject of you was brought up at a family gathering. During this, Eve was downplaying everything that had happened to her. It got so awkward that she finally admitted that nothing happened and that she probably just dreamt it. We were all appalled by this. When we last spoke, we wanted to protect Eve and did the only thing we thought we could do. We know that's not excusing how you were treated. What Eve did was wrong and we're all angry at her. We have called everyone that knew and told them the truth. We all want to speak with you and your sisters want you to meet their families. Please write back if you can find it in you to forgive us. Mom and Dad. So yeah. That's my situation right now. I haven't answered, but they no doubt know I've seen it. Truth be told, I'm seething. So many old, crappy memories are now stirring again. I don't want to forgive them and I wouldn't trust myself to be in the same room as them right now. Part of me wants to call my family and unleash everything on them, to guilt them with everything I went through until they all hit their rock bottom. Then dedicate my life to making my cousin's life as miserable as possible. The other part wants to ignore them and continue with my okay-ish life with my motorcycle and my garden to keep me company. I don't have any friends. The only people I speak to are my coworkers, but we're not really close. I've called my therapist's clinic, but they told me she's on vacation and won't be available for weeks, and I don't want anyone else than her. Who did you meet that forever changed your life? Let me begin by saying I was born in 1998, so this is by far the weirdest experience I've had. Anyway, I'm not much of a dreamer, but when I do dream it's usually very lucid and memorable. So I had a dream that my mother was alone in an old really poor looking house with my newborn sister and was waiting for my dad to get home. It was dark out and my mother was anxious waiting at the door hoping my father would show up. The house was a one-room structure with only 4 or 5 candles illuminating it. I was casually talking to my mother saying it's all okay and just reassuring her that everything is okay. Suddenly my mother looked at me and was thanking me for being with her while she was alone and for protecting her. Then next thing I know I wake up. I thought it was an odd dream but didn't think much of it after I showered and went to work. Fast forward 3 days, it's a Friday night and my parents and I are outside in my front yard sitting around a fire talking. And my parents began to joke about how my mother used to pop my father's bike tires when they lived in Mexico. My parents are Mexican and came to the US in '95. I ask what's the story behind that, and they begin to explain to me that back when my sister was born in 1991, they lived in an old shack in a poor part of a small town in Mexico for a year. My father had the habit of going out on his bike with friends to drink and not coming home until the next morning, so my mother would pop the tires on his bike so he wouldn't leave. I laughed and didn't think much else until they continued on about it. My mother said she'd be terrified of being home alone in the tiny home because they lived in an alley known as El Callejón de la Llorona, which translates to Alley of the Weeping Woman. For those unfamiliar, the Weeping Woman is an urban legend in Mexico about a ghost woman who roams areas of Mexico and even parts of the US weeping for missing kids, so naturally an alley named after the ghost is going to be terrifying as hell. My mother continued on saying how terrified she was in that house alone and would wait praying for Mount Father to come home. My father then made a joke saying something along the lines of, "Why did you want me there? You claimed your guardian angel was protecting you." At this point I thought, okay, what the hell? So I asked my mom more, and she told me that she one night was visited by a man who seemingly came out of the wall, but she felt comfort and familiarity around him. He sat and spoke to her, reassuring her it's okay, before the man seemingly walked back into the wall. My mother said that after this she felt a strong calmness around and was no longer afraid of being there.
My mother-in-law hates the fact that I'm pregnant. I had my baby a few months ago and my mother-in-law has not been supportive. She doesn't talk to me and has told my husband that our child will never address her as grandma. Mother-in-law is very emotionally manipulative with a victim complex. Our relationship is strained and we went low contact with her after she tried to hurt my belly while I was pregnant when she was over for dinner one time. My husband has gone to therapy over the years of emotional and physical abuse he had to endure from her. Over the weekend we went over to my husband's grandma's house for breakfast. Mother-in-law was there. After her ignoring me for most of the time, I heard my mother-in-law and my husband's grandma talking in another language. I'm not fluent, but I can get by. Mother-in-law was complaining about me and husband's grandma told her she needed to be nicer to me. Mother-in-law began to cry saying, "I just can't do it, I just can't." She deleted me off of Facebook and I won't forgive that. My mother-in-law is a very vain individual and needs the validation from Facebook to be able to function. I had deleted her off of Facebook after we announced at Thanksgiving that I was pregnant. My parents hadn't been able to make it to Thanksgiving because my dad had broken his ankle. Mother-in-law cracked a joke saying, "Maybe your mom and dad didn't come this year because your dad is really laying hands on your mom." I was stunned by this and told her that my dad broke his ankle. She said maybe they just said that to hide the bruises. In reality, I know she said this because she is divorced and she had been forced back to the US after her ex-boyfriend called immigration to get her kicked out of Scotland. But then my husband told her I was pregnant. We were met with silence from her. And the only verbal response from her was, "Oh, for F's sake." My husband was crushed from her lack of response and I was done with her. I went to my Facebook that night and deleted her. She found out that she was deleted when she tried to tag me in a post about my pregnancy. She wanted the validation of likes she would get. Apparently when she saw I deleted her, she deleted her own Facebook account out of spite and now is miserable without being able to post. She doesn't like other social medias and Facebook was the only place she could get validation. I'm more than a little amused that she so desperately wants her social media but can't create another account without acknowledging that she deleted her last account out of spite and will do anything to save face.
What's the most deranged thing you have ever seen anyone do? Restaurant kitchen, middle of the busiest night of the year, something went wrong, not sure what, but I'm pretty sure it was a fairly small setback. Sous chef goes ballistic, screams at some people, then reaches barehanded into the blast oven and grabs out 2 scorching hot bowls of baked soup, ruins his hands, and throws them into the window with the skin from his palms visibly stuck to it in places. He immediately calms down, walks off the line to treat his hands, came back out to try and direct from the front for a bit, then at some point just went home without saying anything. Came back a week or 2 later divorced from his wife. Many years ago, I am with my dad downtown Edmonton on Christmas Day buying my girlfriend last-minute earrings. It's minus 30 degrees Celsius. We stop at a sub shop to grab lunch and as we're eating I suddenly spot something that puts a stunned look on my face. My dad asks why I look so perplexed, so I tell him to turn around and see for himself. Here is a 6'4" black man, buck naked, trunk waving in the cold winter air, barefoot, walking down the street outside, people chasing him with blankets trying to cover him, but he shakes them off and keeps marching. Found out later in the newspaper that he had lost his job and snapped. Merry Christmas everybody.
What is your most terrifying animal encounter? I was stationed in Japan for 3 out of the 6 years I was in the Navy. During that time, I leased a Japanese house, and the shower was its own room, a full walk-in with a tub, bench, and all that. So, as the post says, I stumble into the shower one morning, still half asleep, and out of my peripherals, I see a black flash from behind me and hear a thud. Look into the tub, and there is a huntsman spider the size of my hand staring back at me. Don't Google it. Holy shit. My best guess is it was on the wall behind me, and got scared when I walked in. So I go into attack mode immediately. Grab the shower head on a hose, take aim, looking to drown this thing in the tub drain, and as soon as I turned the water on, it jumped out of the tub onto the wall and ran into the window sill. The tactic then became opening the window fast and pinching to death on the sill. As soon as I touched the glass, it jumped out onto the wall again and ran out the shower door. Now I'm cornered in the shower peering out into the powder room to see the huntsman on the cabinet door waiting for me. Sneak to the front door of the house and grab a flip-flop, come back to the powder room, and wing the flip-flop at the spider. Hit it, and wound several of the legs, but do not alive it. It runs out of the bathroom and underneath the stairs, much slower than it was moving prior. Feeling confident that the spider is cornered under the stairs, I grab a can of bug spray and move in to finish it. Looking closely under the stairs, it was a hollow staircase where you could see through the gaps between steps. I see a black tail curled over the back lip of one of the stairs and assume it's the spider hiding on the back of the step. Hit it with the spray, and enter Mucade Centipede. It dropped off the back of the stair and started charging at me. I immediately peed and pooped a little. The front half of its body was up off the floor, and its mouth was visibly biting. It backed me up all the way to the front door as I emptied the entire can of bug spray on it. By the time we got to the door, it was obviously overcome by the chemicals and just writhing around, so I grabbed the other flip-flop and smashed it. Didn't work. Hit it a few times, and it would not die, so I turned the flip-flop on its edge and used it like a saw to cut the thing in half. Then remembered the spider. It was still under the stairs, so I blew under there, and it ran out wounded, and I smashed it with the flip-flop saw. Then I screamed at the top of my lungs for 30 seconds. The whole battle took probably 3 minutes, but it felt like a whole lifetime. I think being naked caused an adrenaline rush 1,000 times greater than if I were fully clothed. When I got to work, I was frazzled enough for my coworkers to notice. Can't tell if it was the worst morning of my life or my biggest triumph, but man won that day. Attorneys, what was your most satisfying case? In 1973, my parents had enough money to build a little ranch house in the country. The small bank in town approved the mortgage and the bank signed a contract to give Bob the money to build the house. Bob, as it turns out, was overbooking himself all over town, leaving his clueless minions to do the actual work. The build took longer and longer, with more and more work having to be ripped out and redone. We're not talking about using the wrong color paint or nailing up some wonky trim, here. The architect forgot to fully erase a line on the blueprints and the framers built a wall through the bathtub. My mother was told don't put anything heavy in the kitchen cabinets because they were attached to the drywall, not the studs, using a few roofing nails through the back of each cabinet. The garage door opening was framed into the living room instead of towards the driveway. And so on. When the bank's representative showed up for the final inspection, my parents met him in the front yard and refused to sign off on Bob's work. Then the representative became angry, as the bank had paid Bob a lot of money. He strode to the front door and pulled on the doorknob, whereupon the entire door, casing included, fell on him. It had simply been wedged, not nailed, into place. The bank called Bob, who finally showed up to supervise the work himself. The only problem was that Bob wasn't any better at building a house than his minions were. My parents still refused to sign off on the house. My mother was a stay-at-home mom in a nasty rental with 2 tiny children while my dad was working 2 jobs while this was going on. Throughout the entire process, the bank and Bob treated them very poorly, bullying my mom and lying to my dad. What should have been an exciting time for my parents was ruined. My mom cried a lot. My dad got depressed. Finally, the bank threatened my parents with foreclosure and Bob threatened to sue my parents for breach of contract because the bank refused to pay him any more money. So my exhausted parents went to an attorney and gave him the rundown. Plumbing, electrical, tiling issues, the whole sorry mess. My parents were scared. All they had was their small down payment savings, so if this became a lengthy court battle the bank and Bob would win. The attorney, Tom, was kind, but my dad said he could tell that he and Mom were doomed from Tom's facial expressions as he sorted through the paperwork. Then, abruptly, Tom smiled. Let's get everyone together for a meeting, he told my parents. Tomorrow. So my parents, Tom, the bank's representative, the bank's attorney, Bob, and Bob's attorney met at the bank. Tom didn't give anyone else time to begin. He said, well, my clients have decided that they no longer want this house. Please remove it. Everyone else start to laugh. Remove it? Have you lost your mind? Tom, in a sweeping, theatrical gesture, placed a deed on the table. My clients own the land the house is sitting on outright. They no longer want the house. Get the house off my client's land. Bob's attorney stared at the deed, and then turned and stared at Bob. You built a house on land you don't own? Bob nodded. The bank's attorney started yelling at the bank's representative. You didn't finance the land the house is on? The representative stammered, no? Tom said firmly, as I said, gentlemen, you're trespassing on my client's land. I expect the house to be removed and the land returned to its original state, at once. My dad said he'll remember the blank looks everyone on the other side of the table passed to one another for his whole life. Sure, the bank could foreclose, on a house that wouldn't exist by the end of the week, with no way to recoup the money. They didn't even own the land it was on. Bob was out the 50% he'd paid out of pocket, plus he was on the hook for tearing down the house and removing it. On top of that, the bank would undoubtedly want him to repay the initial 50% they'd given him. Could they have gone after my parents? Sure. A foreclosure would have meant bad credit for my parents moving forward. They might lose their down payment. But to sign off on the house in its condition at that time would have meant thousands and thousands of dollars in cash to replace/repair everything from the roof to the basement before the house could be safely lived in. The bank knew my parents didn't have that kind of money, they're the ones who approved the mortgage. Suddenly, my parents were good people, it was all such a misunderstanding, and the bank and Bob couldn't do enough for them. The house was brought in line with the original blueprints and specifications immediately, at no extra cost to my parents, but at considerable cost to Bob. My parents signed the mortgage. Bob got the rest of his money, and just about broke even on the build. The bank's representative was fired. And Tom, attorney extraordinaire, got a stinging tale of triumph to recall to fellow attorneys for the rest of his life. Today I screwed up by selling the Switch my grandpa bought me so I could do something thoughtful for my girlfriend. My grandpa surprised me with a brand new Switch last year. This was 2 weeks before he died. The mischievous smile that he had when showing it to me will be forever ingrained in my heart. My grandpa took me in when he noticed how neglectful and abusive my mom was. He just came, packed my bags and sternly told my mom that he was taking me with, and my mom didn't argue. It was the happiest day of my life. He didn't have much, but he showered me with so much love. He meant the world to me, so that Switch had high sentimental value. It was also my very first Switch. Anyway, I started dating my girlfriend earlier this year. She is my first serious girlfriend and it's been amazing. We are high school seniors, but I could definitely see myself marrying her. About a week ago, she wasn't herself and told me that her grandma was in the hospital and she couldn't go see her because she didn't have any money. It didn't look like her grandma was going to make it and she was afraid that she would die without saying goodbye. I spent a few days contemplating how to help her. I didn't get the chance to say goodbye to my own grandpa because I was at school when he died, so I know that pain. I gave it a lot of thought, then decided that maybe I could sell my Switch. It would probably mean everything to my girlfriend. It wasn't an easy choice, but I did it, then gave her the money. She told me that she had left and after that I couldn't reach her. I understood that she had a lot going on, so I waited for her to contact me. The following day I saw her friends' stories. They were at a music festival hanging out with some random guys and my girlfriend was there. I didn't know how to confront her, so I just blocked her on everything. How did you leave your school in handcuffs? I stacked thousands and became the Escobar of my high school. I'm typing this as I'm facing charges for moving what the court deems to be substances. It all started with me getting a text from my girlfriend. I tried to call her and all I heard back from her was she's busy. After a minute of confusion, she sent a video of her getting backshots. That was it for me. I spent an entire year being depressed, getting fat, whacking it, and playing video games. There is no more humble feeling than being declined food. I ran out of honey buns, so I went to my local store to restock. As usual, I didn't have any money, so I asked the owner to add it to my bill. He told me to flock off and I was stunned. What could I say to that? I was a bum, plain and simple. But something just snapped inside of me. I needed money and I needed money fast. I had been watching Breaking Bad and Snowfall and I saw the crazy rate Walter White and Franklin Saint were stacking money, but there had to be a different way. No way my conscience would allow me to hustle drugs, I just couldn't do it. But I needed something better. After doing some reaching I saw how people were obsessed and addicted to jewels, but I thought bigger. The problem with jewels is they make you tired and lazy only to get a minute of dopamine. What if there was something I could sell that not only you could smoke but you would get energy on top of that? After some digging I found the caffeine diffusers from Solstice. It had everything I needed, so I stocked up and I waited for them to arise. I put together a team that went around school smashing jewels so we could create a demand. I collected data on who their suppliers were and how much they bought them for. I used my team to start advertising around school under wraps, and then it was time to start selling. After a month everyone got the hype. People were using the diffusers everywhere. They actually got the energy they needed. Grades started massively improving. Everything was perfect. I had the money I needed to flex on my ex-girlfriend and I was the supplier for every party. Things were amazing until teachers finally caught on. They called me to the principal's office. They interrogated me and insisted that I was selling nicotine to everyone when that just wasn't true. I tried to convince them that there was no nicotine in it that could make you addicted. You had as much control as you wanted and smoke as freely as you want. They didn't believe me. Now, I'm on house arrest facing charges awaiting court dates. That's where I need your guys' help. Was I in the wrong for selling this? Morally, should I be punished for this? I kept everyone happy and I'm now facing corruption. Whatever, I still flock Mad Beach's dough.
Lady at work harasses me over my breast implants, so I got her fired. 4 years ago, when I was 24, my mom passed away from breast cancer. Because my grandmother had also passed away from breast cancer, I went to a specialist for a checkup. They found some cells in one of my breasts that could turn into cancer. I had a few options: get regular checkups every few months to catch cancer early, even though it might never develop. Remove the breast with the bad cells but still have to monitor the other breast. Remove both breasts to eliminate the risk. I chose the third option, the bilateral mastectomy. It was a big decision, but I didn't want to take any chances after seeing what cancer did to my family. The surgery left me with noticeable scars that made me very self-conscious. I struggled with depression and low self-esteem. I went to a therapist who recommended a plastic surgeon. The surgeon suggested implants to cover the scars. After the surgery, I felt better about my appearance and gained more confidence. Now, I'm 28 and working in an office. A coworker, Jill, found out I had gotten implants and started making hurtful comments about my appearance. She joked about it with others and created an uncomfortable environment. She was just relentless about calling me more plastic than Barbie and other hurtful things like that. After months of enduring her comments, I reached a breaking point. During a lunch conversation, I revealed to everyone why I had gotten the implants and stood up for myself. Some coworkers supported me, while others sided with Jill. HR got involved and there was a meeting. The person who was supposed to review me was Jill's friend Debbie. So, since I was worried about bias, I pointed out a clause in my contract that allowed me to request an unbiased reviewer. This led to a more fair discussion with HR and a supervisor. I collected statements from coworkers who witnessed Jill's behavior and harassment. HR interviewed everyone involved, including Jill. Eventually, Jill was let go and the case was closed. I felt relieved that my workplace became a better environment after standing up for myself. My friend blindly followed a self-help book and ended up in a cult. When I was in high school, I became friends with a girl whom we'll call Jo. She and I became friends and bonded over our love for plants, books, and art. To paint a picture of her, she grew up in a religious Christian household, and left Christianity sometime in early high school. She was on and off of different antidepressants and mood stabilizers throughout our friendship. She had the same therapist for many years and had a close relationship with her. She loves her animals and urges me and our other close friend, Ember, to let her dogs and cats lick our faces because that's how they connect to people. She saves baby birds with broken wings, loves kids, and is generally just a positive and happy-go-lucky kind of chick. I left for college in the fall of 2022, and she was still in high school, so we didn't talk or hang out for almost a year. We also didn't speak the summer leading up to the school year, because there had been a split down our friend group and Joe, Ember and I had gone our separate ways. She reconnected to me sometime in early 2023 asking to start hanging out, and I told her no and made excuses because of the abrupt nature of our friendship ending the summer prior. I started working with her again at my summer job in my hometown a month ago and have since noticed many changes in her demeanor, verbiage, and overall personality, and I started smoking with her after work sometimes like we used to, including Ember. She talks way less, and frequently zones out or stays completely silent when anyone is talking to her. She often tells me she doesn't understand what we're talking about, or what's going on. She speaks in a kiddish manner, often reciting omens about forgiveness and peace. Almost scripture-like. Like a kid in Bible school. Anything that she liked before, books, art, TV, etc., she has no interest in now. The only TV she watches are kids' cartoons, and says the reason why is that TV is meaningless, so I just watch happy stuff, which seems just like some hippie crap she would say, so I didn't think much of that. I noticed as we all hung out that when Ember or I would talk about anything we liked, our hobbies or interests, she never had any of her own. She takes care of her plants, and reads and meditates. The thing is, she only reads one book. Over and over. It's called A Course in Miracles. As time has gone on, she mentions this book more and more. In fact, 9 out of 10 times I hear her say anything, it's just a reference to the book or peace or forgiveness or how nothing matters and reality isn't real. She claims that the only real thing is love, and anything else in this world or life other than that is ego. One day Ember and I went to her house to smoke, and when we got there we entered her room like usual, and to sit on the bed, I had to close this big blue book that was open to the smack dab middle in the middle of her bed. I hand her the book to sit down, and I'm reading the title as I hand it over. She takes this action as interest, and starts explaining the book to me. I hate to use this word, but she truly sounded completely delusional. She claimed she was just further along on her spiritual journey than we were, and she had reached enlightenment by discovering that reality is an illusion, and sin doesn't exist because nothing is real. She no longer believes in personal accountability, and recently has made plans with me 12 hours in advance and blown me off as I'm sitting there waiting in the parking lot for her to show up. I recently told her how upset this recurring action is, and she told me I'm not a planner. I'm a free spirit, I just go with the flow. What's supposed to happen happens, and what doesn't, doesn't. The issue with this, of course, being that she wasn't that much of a free spirit to reach out and make the plan in the first place. I started looking into this book, and it turns out that the author regretted writing the book immensely, and said she hated that damn book. She died of cancer, which according to the book, isn't possible because enlightenment cures all sickness. The book has been openly criticized for its sketchy ties to Christianity, the bureaucratic crap the author did to call this a self-help book even though it's more of a religious book, and also the insane contradictory statements it makes. The author of the book claimed that Jesus spoke to her and told her to rewrite the Bible, because it was wrong. Hence, this book. I've also read that this book preys on young minds that were indoctrinated by Christianity and escaped it. Some call it New Age woo. The more I see, the worse it gets. The author says she regrets writing it in the first place. This book sends people into a state of dissociative state. I remember Joe saying to me, before I found this book, I wanted to unalive myself. I am afraid that she's already too deep in and has no grip on reality at all, not that she believes in it anyway. And the loss of it might send her off the deep end. I have lots of crap on my plate, so does everyone, but this is a really large topic, and I definitely don't have any energy to entertain this further. She feels hollow. She has no passion for anything, except her belief in nothing. As her friend, and just as a human that is concerned, I feel some sort of obligation to do something about this. I also feel the urge to just not speak to her anymore and call it done. Her actions are very selfish, and it is hard to empathize with her when I know that she didn't do any research. It's hard to even take it seriously in a way. She didn't do as much as a Google search before devoting her life to this book. She lives by its scriptures and uses them to do whatever she wants, whenever she feels like it. I am wondering if my friend is still in there somewhere. She's just graduated high school and is still very young, but has always been a little naive and uninformed. I cannot stop worrying about the consequences this is going to have.
People do want to work, they just don't want to work for shitty jobs, bosses, and pay. I was desperate for employment. The economy was in the gutter, and job opportunities were scarce. That's when I stumbled upon a listing that seemed promising. Little did I know that I was about to step into a house of horrors. The job involved mind-numbing data entry, constant micromanagement, and an office that resembled a prison cell. My boss was a nightmare wrapped in an egotistical bow. He had a knack for belittling his employees, treating us like mere pawns in his twisted game of power. To make matters worse, the pay was an insult to all my hard work and education. I barely made enough to scrape by, and any hope of financial stability seemed like a distant dream. I had dreams and aspirations, just like anyone else. I craved a rewarding job where my efforts would be acknowledged and rewarded. I longed for a boss who valued my skills and treated me with respect. And let's not forget about fair compensation for my hard work. Is that too much to ask? Eventually, I reached my breaking point. I decided to take matters into my own hands and reclaim my sanity. In the darkest hour of a dreary Monday morning, as my boss gleefully spewed his usual verbal abuse, I mustered all the courage within me. I stood up, looked him dead in the eyes, and said, "I quit." The stunned silence that followed was music to my ears. As I gathered my belongings and walked out of that godforsaken office for the last time, a sense of liberation washed over me. I had broken free from the chains of a shitty job, an egotistic boss, and unjust pay. The world was full of possibilities, and I was ready to conquer it on my own terms. But little did I know that my journey was only beginning. As I stepped out into the world, I was met with a wave of new opportunities. I was determined to find a job that would give me the respect, recognition, and compensation I deserved. I searched high and low, and eventually, I found the perfect job. I was ecstatic. This was my chance to prove myself and make a name for myself. I was ready to take on the world. I was ready to make my mark. I was ready to show the world what I was capable of. But little did I know that this was only the beginning of a thrilling new chapter in my life. What adventures awaited me, what successes, failures, and jaw-dropping moments lay ahead. Only time will tell.
I looked through my boyfriend's phone, and I am so unbelievably thankful I did. I have been dating my boyfriend for about a year, and it was the healthiest relationship I had ever been in. He has been nothing but doting, loving, and caring. We were planning on going on a vacation to celebrate our 1 year. We were planning our years together. Last weekend I woke up before him. I don't know why I did it, but I saw his phone and decided to look through it. What I found shocked me to my core. I searched my name in his messages, and every single text was absolutely foul. He described our intimacy life in detail in group chats, but not in a positive light. He called my intimate parts of my body weird, said he hated the things I did in bed, and making jokes about exact quotes of things I did in bed in the meanest way, saying things like it would be hot, but not when she does it. It's hot for a minute, but then this bitch opens her effing mouth and starts speaking. He made fun of my scars in the group chat too. The scars I gave myself after experiencing rope and going through depression in my early teenage years. His entire friends spent hours making fun of what I said, and he absolutely embarrassed me. I wish that was the worst. I'm bi, and he called me the effing F slur to his friends. He also had endless conversations with his friends about how he can't effing stand me, that I am so effing lame. They had endless conversations about how I don't add anything to conversations, that he's only with me for the intimacy, and the kicker was the following conversation that went, his friend, "Well, if you move, at least you'll finally have an out with her." "Oh yeah, you've convinced me," my boyfriend replied. "Is she really that bad?" asked friend. "She's nice enough, but the longer we've dated, I realized I can't effing stand this beach in public." And it went on. And on. And on. Every single insecurity I have ever had was laid out in group chats with his closest friends. Made into a joke. Made into a punchline. He made fun of me, had entire conversations about how much he couldn't stand me, so much so that it was a running joke about how he was trying to get out of this relationship with his friends. The messages were also filled with absolute misogynistic, homophobic, racist things, saying things about how he just ignores me when I talk because he can't effing stand when broads are talking. Saying how women should never be in charge of plans. Anything. Talking about how people like me were the reason the world was going to crap. I woke him up, and he tried to explain things away, saying how he didn't mean it. But the damage had been done. I realized that after all this time, I had absolutely no clue who this person was. I could not recognize him. The worst part? After years of therapy, of losing myself completely and rebuilding myself from scratch from my prior abusive relationship, I ended up dating another person who viewed me the same way as my ex-abuser, and honestly said much worse. I have never in my life seen someone whose personality was so unbelievably split. Every one of our mutual friends was shocked beyond belief when I showed them the receipts. None of them could believe it either. I just feel so sick to my stomach. I've never met someone who could be two completely polar opposite people, in the most extreme way. I wish he steps on a Lego. My narcissistic ex-boyfriend poisoned me over a LinkedIn bio, but he accidentally gave me a golden ticket to Harvard. Basically, my high school rival was a guy named Nathan. He and I were super similar, we were co-presidents of the same clubs, had similar academic portfolios, had done research papers together, and we spent a lot of time together, so despite being known as academic enemies, Nathan and I were actually in a relationship for 2 years of high school. Now those were years that I really valued and enjoyed. Nathan took pretty much all my firsts. But, once the time for college applications rolled around, Nathan dumped me, saying that he needed to focus if he wanted to get into Harvard and he couldn't be distracted with me. This made me upset for a number of reasons, mainly because he called our 2-year relationship a distraction, but also because Harvard was also my dream school, and I didn't appreciate the way Nathan just assumed he would get in over me. And so, just like that, our academic rivalry was back and we each had something to prove. But I never could have prepared myself for the lengths Nathan would go to, just to beat me. Everything went downhill at this debate competition, a 4-day international conference in DC that we had been preparing for all year. This was the final big competition before college applications were due and our final chance to prove that we belonged at an Ivy League school. Everyone was tense, not just me and Nathan. And everyone wanted to win. But wanting to win will never excuse what Nathan did, even though I'm incredibly grateful for it, because his stupidity changed my life drastically for the better. It first started on the train to DC when Nathan changed seats so that we would be next to each other. It was a little awkward, but I thought that this was just Nathan's way of trying to apologize for all the unpleasant tension between us, so I let my guard down and didn't think anything suspicious of it. For the remainder of the trip, Nathan tried acting like a friend. That train ride, he treated me like he used to. We spent time studying together, laughed over some inside jokes, and we even practiced our speeches in front of each other. I started to think this competition would be good for us, to make him realize that we couldn't lose our friendship over just school, and dare I say give our relationship another shot. By the end of the train ride, things almost felt normal, and it felt almost natural when Nathan showed up to my hotel room the next morning with a cup of coffee for me. Him getting me breakfast while I was running late really felt like progress, especially since that was something we used to do for each other when we were still together. It even made me start daydreaming about maybe even being in a relationship with him again. All felt right in the world. That was until I noticed something had changed in me. About halfway through the first day of the conference, I felt like I was in a hyper-focused mode, as if someone had filtered out the white noise in my brain and just left the sharpest, most productive parts behind. When I gave impromptu speeches, I found myself having extra time to think as if time was going by slightly slower than usual. And when the time for questions came, I asked the most precise, detail-oriented questions that highlighted major flaws in my opponent's arguments. Unfortunately, Nathan fell into this category. Somehow, I was beating everyone in the debate room, including him. By the second night, it was obvious that I was going to win. I was just hoping this wouldn't cause a rift in our friendship because we were just starting to become close again. But all my concerns melted away because the next morning, Nathan came to my room and gave me a morning coffee to prep me for the day, even though he was somewhat agitated. So 3 days in a row, Nathan brought me coffee, competed against me during the day, and chilled at night. But on the fourth and final day of the competition, everything was even more tense than usual. My anxiety only grew when Nathan failed to deliver me a morning coffee. I tried not to think anything of it initially because it could have just been a coincidence, but then, Nathan didn't show up to the debate at all. He completely skipped the final day of the competition. That's when I knew something was wrong. I ran to his hotel room the second the committee session ended. After banging on his door for 5 minutes straight, he finally let me in, but the moment I stepped inside, Nathan exploded at me, asking how it was possible for me to be performing so well. I was going to make some lighthearted joke because I genuinely had no idea how I managed to improve so much in just 4 days. Everything that happened during this conference put all my other work these past 4 years to shame, which was saying a lot since my senior year was the best I had ever performed. But I never got a word out, because Nathan immediately went on a chauvinistic, narcissistic tangent and revealed something truly insane. He had been trying to sabotage me from the very first day. Apparently he felt that this competition was the perfect thing to round out his application, and he really wanted it on his LinkedIn biography so he could call himself an international debate champion, and so he had played dirty to try to win. What I thought was old friends catching up over a cup of coffee was actually Nathan giving me lace coffee to make me lose the competition. At least that's what he thought. Nathan told me that he had tried to intentionally buy me coffee with psychedelics and legal psilocybin alternatives in it, hoping that it would make me loopy, distracted, and confused. But I knew the coffee he had given me was the opposite of psychedelic. If anything, it was focus enhancing, and I felt ultra productive. I asked Nathan for the exact coffee brand he had bought and looked it up to confirm what I already knew, that the psychedelic coffee he bought had nothing to do with psychedelics. It was simply a mushroom coffee fusion blend. It was called Clarity Brew, and from the name I could sort of understand why Nathan might think that it was for a psychedelic type of clarity, but the actual product description made it clear that this coffee was a blessing, not a curse. The mushrooms Nathan had thought would hurt my chances of winning this competition were chaga mushrooms and lion's mane, which botanists will know are just cognitive power banks for the mind. I respected Nathan wholeheartedly until this point, but never in my life did I think that he would be capable of such a low-level Sigma IQ move. And even though Nathan had basically tried to poison me with his coffee, it worked so well on me that once I was done yelling at him, I took the Clarity Brew with me to confiscate it, only to bring it all the way home so I could continue using the coffee until the end of senior year. That was when I discovered that the coffee didn't just make me more productive, it gave me long-lasting energy and naturally minimized the jittery effects of caffeine. Nathan had basically bought me super coffee in an attempt to drag me down. To no one's surprise, I won the competition and was later accepted to Harvard. Nathan was not. We still text sometimes, and he's apologized a lot for what he did. I've even started connecting him to a few people at Harvard to help him out with some research opportunities because I just want to be the bigger person here. Hopefully one day, he'll be the same way. Edit. Okay, wait, thanks so much for all the comments. I think you guys are right about him just using me for networking. I've decided to block Nathan and cut contact with him permanently, because you're right, he lost the privilege of being my friend the day he tried to drug me. Though yes, I still do take Clarity Brew.
I ruined my cheating sister's life because she deleted my Sims 4 game. Snitching on her was my greatest revenge. I have an older sister named Stephanie. Her and her boyfriend Trench have been together for 4 years and have a baby girl. Miranda. Trench has no idea that Stephanie has been having an affair with her boss for at least 2 years, and they are planning on getting married next year. I had known about the affair for 3 months. I found out when I was ordering a DoorDash on Stephanie's phone and noticed incoming work emails from her boss pretty much revealing their whole affair. Stephanie knows that I know because I confronted her about it, but I told her I didn't want to get involved and I trusted that she would sort this out with Trench as this wasn't my business. I am an avid Sims player. I stream Sims gameplay in any free time I have. I'm playing The Sims. My sister and I got into petty fights, but nothing nearly as bad as the one we had after I expressed my concern about the affair she was having with her boss and told her my thoughts about the situation and said how bad I felt for Trench, who is madly in love with her. She flew into a rage and said it's not my position to comment on other people's relationships and I should mind my own business and stop being such a nosy B-word. I let it go and forgot about it until I got on Sims that night and my account was logged out. So I logged back in and my account was overridden. This means that all my progress before the override was gone. I was blind with rage and I confronted my sister about it, who simply said if you get involved in my business, I'll get involved with yours. I stream The Sims on Twitch and make YouTube videos and I have a few thousand subscribers and I average around 3K views on my streams on all platforms combined. I make a good amount of money from Twitch and although it is not my main source of income, it really helps me financially and it's really nice having the extra money. So, without my Sims account I cannot stream. I was destroyed about this. I spoke to my parents about the situation and they were sympathetic as they know that I stream it to my subscribers and I've loved the game ever since it came out, but they were confused why she would do such a thing. So I told them about Stephanie's affair and they were livid. They love Trench and have always been extremely supportive of Stephanie and Trench's relationship. They love him like a son and advised me to tell him before they get married. This ultimatum put me in a very uncomfortable position, but I knew he deserved the truth and I wanted to get back at my sister. I called Trench and asked to meet him for coffee and that's when I told him what I knew. He was absolutely crushed. He was hysterical right there in the cafe Trench and I then drove to my parents' house where Stephanie was to pick up Miranda as my parents were babysitting her while Stephanie went to work. Trench and I walk in and Stephanie can immediately tell what has happened by his red puffy face that shows he's obviously been crying, but instead of apologizing or attempting to fix a relationship, she turns to me and begins cussing me out and hysterically screaming all kinds of obscenities until my parents intervene and attempt to calm her down. Trench looks completely defeated and takes Miranda off my mother and leaves the house. At this point Stephanie is still yelling at me and my parents tell her to leave. I leave about 15 minutes after Stephanie, and go home. I get a text from Stephanie reading, "Thanks a lot you effing B-word, thanks to you Trench has left me and taken my child. This is all your fault because you couldn't stay out of my effing business and you always have to get involved because you're a sad miserable lonely B-word who no one could ever love." I tried to reply but she had already blocked my number. Since then she's cut off all contact with me and my parents and we haven't heard from her since. My parents said that they don't care to fix the relationship as Stephanie has shown them who she truly is. My friend said that I should have stayed out of her love life and it was unnecessary to cause this whole blow up and my brother said I'm a jerk for outing her and breaking the family up and now I'm questioning if I did the right thing.
What's the worst birthday gift you ever got? Thought I was getting a bike for my 15th birthday, but my foster parents announced that they were sending me to a group home after living with them for 11 years. Devastation. My own scarf. Yes, that's right, my mother went into my room, took my only scarf, wrapped it and gave it to me like it was a new scarf. My grandma got me a hairbrush with a plastic horse head handle. The horse head was all chipped up and there was hair in the brush. A lint remover. I was 12. A very obviously used candle. One year my husband got me a bag with stuff from the $1 store. Not even stuff I would want. Like a notebook and a coupon organizer and a few other things. Maybe $5 of junk. We had no money troubles that would prevent him from getting me a present.
Your parents disrespected me? I'm leaving. So, I am 26 female, black, and my boyfriend 32 male, white, have been dating for about 5 months now and he is honestly the best thing that ever happened to me. He is the first guy who's ever made me consider marriage and starting a family. I did love him. Now to the story. Last weekend was his mom's 60th birthday and my boyfriend was going to go to the birthday party. He thought it would be a nice occasion for him to introduce me to his family, so he asked me to join him. We let his family know that he was bringing me and they were okay with it. His parents' place is 3 hours away from the city we live in, so we decided that we were going to spend the night. So, we arrived at his parents' place and his mom, dad, brother and sister were there. They hugged me while greeting me and I honestly thought they were genuinely happy to meet me. It didn't feel like anything was off. They all seemed like nice people. So we spent the evening talking, and there was a lot of laughter and everything was going great. At around 8 p.m., my boyfriend and his brother leave for the airport to pick up a relative of theirs who was flying in for the party. So, I'm left at the house with his mom, dad and sister. I didn't feel unsafe or anything. They had been nice to me the whole time. I had left my phone charging in the room we were going to sleep in, so I excused myself to go check if I had any important messages or calls. There weren't any, so it didn't take long. I start heading back to the living room and as I'm walking back, I hear them talking. Then his mom asks, "So, what do you think about her?" I immediately knew they were talking about me and I honestly wanted to know what my potential in-laws thought about me, so I stopped and listened. His dad says, "She's nice." His sister agrees with him and adds, "She's pretty too." Then his mom says something that immediately made me sick to my stomach. She says, "Yeah, if only she wasn't a foo king N-word." And they all agreed with her. My heart dropped. I tiptoed back to the room and I sat there so confused. I was shaking so much I didn't know what to do. I wanted to call my boyfriend but I had a weird feeling so I didn't. I felt so alone and unsafe. I felt like I couldn't trust anyone around me, not even my boyfriend. I live in Canada and people here are not as open with their racism as in other places. Which in my opinion, is much more scary. Now at that moment, the only people I could think of asking for help were my sisters. One of my sisters lives in the US and the other one is in Canada but in a different province. They both live far away, so there is nothing they could have done to help me at that moment, but I felt like they are the only people I could trust. We have a WhatsApp group chat, so I sent them a message telling them what happened. I have lived in Canada for a couple of years, but it's not easy to make trustworthy friends here. Canada is a lonely place. I have met a lot of people, but I don't feel like any of them are my friends. If you are an immigrant in Canada, you probably understand what I mean. Anyway, back to the story. So my sisters were like, "You need to find a way to get out of there immediately." They tell me to make up an excuse saying I had an emergency and needed to leave. I stayed in the room for some time scared to death. It took everything in me not to start crying. After I had collected my thoughts and calmed down, I did what my sisters told me to do. I hadn't unpacked my bag yet, and luckily, we brought my car cause it's fuel efficient compared to my boyfriend's. I took my bag and car keys and passed the living room in a rush saying something came up and I had to leave. I didn't give them a chance to ask any questions. I just got in my car and drove away. It was getting late and I wasn't in the right state of mind to drive back home. I just wanted to get as far away as possible before stopping at a hotel for the night. My boyfriend had called me a couple of times. I called him back, but I couldn't bring myself to tell him what had happened, so I gave him the same excuse I gave his parents. He asked if he should come home as well, and I told him it wasn't necessary. I went home the next day and my boyfriend showed up at my apartment a few hours later. I looked at him and it felt like all the love I had for him had just disappeared. Though I acted like everything was fine, I wondered if he was racist too. He had been so great during our whole relationship. I never once felt like he had any racist thoughts or feelings. But I can't help but think about how his family made me believe they were nice people, and I keep wondering if he's also just pretending to like me. We don't live together, but my lease is ending in July. He owns his place, so I was supposed to move in with him after my lease ended, but I have managed to get out of moving in with him. I don't feel like I love him anymore. It's been 3 days now since we got back from his parents' place, and I want to end things with him without it causing any trouble, but I'm really...
Men of Reddit, what is the creepiest thing a girl has ever said or done to you? I've had a girl create about 50 different Snapchat, Facebook, and Instagram accounts all to try to get me to friend her. I've never met this woman in person, and yet every few weeks I'll get a handful of friend requests from her. More effed up than creepy, but my high school girlfriend was just using me until her boyfriend got out of juvie and admitted such to me on the day her boyfriend got out of juvie. When I was in grade school, a girl snuck up behind me in gym class to sniff my butt. I caught her in the act, and just felt gross. Met this girl online and talked to her a bit. I started to like her. Later found out that the pic she showed me of herself was actually a pic of her friend who had passed away due to cancer.
My boyfriend still thinks we're dating. I haven't talked to that psycho in a year. How long do you think your boyfriend could go without talking to you? A day? A week? A month, even? Well, I learned that mine can go an entire year without speaking a single word to me and never even bat an eye. Do you want to know how I know this? Because I decided to do a little test and see what would happen. I realized about 6 months into us dating that he never started conversations or made plans. Ever. To be honest, I don't even think he made the original first move that began our relationship. When I noticed this, I decided to put it to the test. I mean, we spoke every single day, he always answered quickly, and was engaged in the conversation the whole time. But he just never initiated. I wondered if I just never gave him the chance to. Especially since I'm an early riser. So one day, I didn't text him first thing in the morning. I figured that he would probably wake up and see that I didn't text him, then just message me quickly. Then, all of my problems would be solved. I was literally giving myself a migraine from worrying about it. Anyways, I woke up at 7 in the morning, like usual, and didn't text him. Typically, he wakes up between 8:30 and 9, so I assumed I would get a text around that time. But, 10 eventually rolled around and my phone was as dry as the Sahara Desert. I waited another few hours. Still, there was nothing. Then, I waited all the way into the night. Finally, I gave up and laid into him a little bit. I wondered why he hadn't texted me at all, but he didn't really have an explanation. He just said that he thought I wanted to be left alone. I wondered why he wouldn't inquire, even a little bit, about why the person who he spoke to every day for the last 6 months suddenly wouldn't text him, but he seemed unbothered. For a few weeks, I just let it slide, but then it started to get to me. I told my friend about it and they suggested that I see how long it takes for him to text me back. I was curious, especially since we just had a conversation about it. So, I did it again. But this time I was going to commit to it for as long as I possibly could. Boy, did I commit. I didn't hear from him for a day, then a week, then a month. At this point, our relationship was over in my eyes. He couldn't even text his girlfriend. But, he could post pics fishing with the boys on his story. Eventually, the holidays came and went. Our first anniversary passed by. I had gotten over him completely. Eventually, it was the 1-year mark of when I decided to not initiate a conversation with him. I felt sad, disappointed, and annoyed. It was frustrating that a good relationship had been thrown out of the window. In an effort to make myself feel better, I decided to grab some ice cream. I walked into the grocery store and was suddenly face to face with him. He turned to me with a huge smile on his face and came in for a hug. "Hey babe, how are you? I haven't seen you in a while." My jaw dropped. I was in complete and utter shock. He just called me babe? Then, he began chatting as if nothing ever happened. As if a year hadn't passed since we last spoke to each other. "I told my grandma about you, she wants to meet soon." I reached into the freezer and grabbed the ice cream I wanted. Then, I left. I couldn't believe what had happened. It's been another year since that happened and I am curious if he thinks we are still together.
My boyfriend spent our anniversary with his female best friends and now people think he's dating his sister. My ex-boyfriend Tyler was very close to his female best friend Lily, so close that people thought they were dating. The effort he put into my Valentine's gift was nothing compared to what he does for Lily's Palantines. One day a co-worker of his confronted me for flirting with him when he has a girlfriend. I tried explaining to him that I was his girlfriend, but he didn't believe me. He didn't leave me alone until I showed him pictures of us on my phone. I've tried talking to Tyler several times about how this makes me feel, but he always brushed me off and said Lily is like family to him and I'm being insecure. Our anniversary was coming up and a travel agent friend of mine got me a good deal for a 2-night stay at a resort about 2.5 hours away. I booked it, and when I told Tyler, he seemed very excited. About a week before our trip, he came to me, asked if he could go with Lily since she has a lot going on and could use a pick-me-up. I was shocked and asked him if he really rather spend our anniversary with another woman. He just got mad and called me a cruel, jealous witch and said Lily really need him right now. When I still told him no, he said didn't want to go at all. Then he left and we didn't talk for 3 days, so I took that as us officially breaking up. As I was crying to my best friend about the breakup and being unable to get my money back, she suggested we go as friends. Time skipped to about an hour after we check and I got a call from the front desk saying someone was trying to check in under my reservation. When I went down to check, I saw Tyler and Lily. Tyler immediately stomped toward me and went off on me for taking the spot when Lily needed it more, and then Lily plopped down on a chair and started bawling her eyes out, saying how she just wanted a relaxing weekend to forget about all that's happened to her. After a while of him screaming and her crying, security forces them to leave. The next day on social media, Tyler posted that he and Lily were officially together. Unfortunately for him, my friends and family are vengeful people. They all started commenting on his post with comments like, "Isn't that your sister? Aren't y'all related?" and "Sweet Home Alabama." He tried to deny those comments, but it was no use because the rumors already spread. It's been 3 months since then, and while nobody bothers them about it anymore, it definitely ruined their reputation, and that makes me happy.
My girlfriend keeps having accidents that may be on purpose. So, for some context, my girlfriend and I have been dating for about 1.5 years and have been living together for about half a year, and we've been going strong. We rarely fight, and even when we do, it's normally about trivial things that get cleared up in a few hours at most. I love her a lot and I believe she loves me too. However, about 4 months ago, my girlfriend has been having some, as she calls them, accidents. The first time was when we were standing at our kitchen counter, talking about something work-related. Then, suddenly I heard a dripping noise and realized that she was wetting herself. She was really embarrassed and quickly ran to the bathroom to clean up and get changed. And I never brought it up that evening, chalking it up as just a one-time accident. Nothing else happened for the rest of the week. However, around next week, at night, we were watching a movie, La La Land, and about halfway through I felt something wet on the couch. Yeah, she peed herself again. This time she didn't even react to it until I pointed it out, upon which she seemed embarrassed again and again hurriedly excused herself to the restroom. Now I was beginning to get a bit concerned because she had previously never mentioned any bladder control issues or incontinence to me. I washed out the pillows and rinsed the blanket while she changed. I still didn't know what to say, so I didn't probe, although I did tease her a little about it before we went to bed. After that, the frequency of these accidents have increased to 1 to 3 times a week. We'll be talking, or playing a game, or doing something else together. Then suddenly, boom, peed herself and needs to change. I had to suspect that these may not be accidental at all, since a few times I'd seen her pause what she's doing, squat slightly, and then start peeing. At first, she seemed genuinely embarrassed, but now she's at times become nonchalant, shuffling her way to the toilet to clean herself up. I turned a blind eye to it a few more times, but I couldn't anymore. If it was genuinely something she couldn't control, then we needed to see a doctor about it. One day she peed herself again while we were eating dinner. The cushion of that seat got permanently ruined, but that's honestly alright, and then went to change. I finally gathered up the courage to ask her, and when she came back, I did. I said something along the lines of, "Babe, you've been having quite a few accidents lately. Is this something that we need to talk to the doctor about?" But she acted kind of dismissively, saying that it's normal for women to have small accidents sometimes, and that it was probably due to job stress. I had the feeling she was hiding something, but didn't pry any further. She had been having some trouble with layoffs at her job, and so I was inclined to believe her. However, since then, her job security has improved significantly, but there's been no decrease in these accidents. And one more incident has led me to believe that this is probably a turn-on of hers or something of the sort. One Sunday morning, when she had woken up a bit earlier than I had, I walked out to our living room and saw her squatting on the ground with wet boxers and a puddle on the floor. She had her back turned to me and didn't notice me walking in the room, but got up a bit startled when I called her. She was obviously a bit nervous and made up something about tripping on the floor and wetting herself. In fact, in addition, at times, there's been a smell of poo. Is she pooping herself as well? I'd be sure, because although we do alternate doing laundry, she insists on cleaning up her own pants and underwear after the accidents, which I'm glad for. But if this is a turn-on or something like that, then we could talk it out. Although we are vanilla so far, I've already let her know that I'd be willing to consider anything that she requested within reasonable limits. This, I consider within reasonable limits. However, we needed to do this in a controlled space, since cleanup was often a hassle, and at times there was a lingering smell.
My racist mother-in-law helped my husband cheat. Now I'm expected to go to their house for holidays. I'm 7 months postpartum and I've been married for 6 months. I knew my husband for 5 years, and halfway during that he cheated on me. His mother found the girl and introduced them, and his sister kept the secret from me even when I asked her about it straight to her face. She also covered his tracks when he wasn't answering the phone because he was effing her for 3 months straight. Why are we married, you ask? Well, I got pregnant and I was in college, so stupid me, I married him. Anyway, it's our first holiday with our son, and now my husband is begging me to spend the holidays at their house. Mind you, when I was pregnant I was not allowed anywhere near his mother's house because she didn't like me. She called me a WHRE to my face and shoved me off her front lawn before I got pregnant. My whole pregnancy she wouldn't accept me, kept telling my husband that the baby wasn't his, and kept telling him to leave me and leave the baby. When I gave birth, she brought my husband gifts and my son a card, but didn't give me anything, and I literally almost died during childbirth. She didn't even say hi to me in the hospital. I also want to add that his mother is extremely abusive and has pulled the knife on her children multiple times. She has sister-in-law wrapped around her finger, and my sister-in-law will cry anytime someone insults her. Sister-in-law and husband are extremely trauma bonded, and this is important to know because I haven't been able to win fights against his sister because he always takes her side, even when she's wrong, which is most of the time. So last year when I was pregnant I was not allowed to go to Mill's house for the holidays, and mother-in-law even said don't bring that woman anywhere near my effing face. So naturally, my husband begged me to go see them for the holidays alone, because his sister was, of effing course, crying her eyes out about how she couldn't see him for the holidays since I wasn't allowed over. Sister-in-law and husband told me that they wanted one last holiday season as a normal family, also known as without me and my effing son. So, being pregnant and all, I said fine, but from now on you'll spend holidays with me and our son at my mom's house because we live here. If your family wants to see you they can visit all of us here, knowing that my mother-in-law refuses to step foot in my house or be around my family because she's effing racist against my race even though she's the same effing race. He agreed and said yes. Now fast forward to this year, my mom has let us live rent-free for 7 months, and has done literally everything to support us. She sleeps on the floor so my husband can sleep in the bed, does my husband's laundry, feeds us meals, and watches my son at any moment for no cost. She's literally been 1000% supportive and helped my husband finish college without having to worry about anything else. But now, all of a sudden, my husband is enraged that he can't see his family for the holidays, is calling me a effing bitch, and telling me that once we move out my mom will never be allowed to see our son because his mom isn't allowed to see him. What the actual F? His mom hasn't even done anything to help. She always just crying to him, apologizing for how she treated me and saying she wants to see the baby now. Well, too effing bad, you had literally a whole year to work through your problems and now that's not my problem. I'm so effing sick of my husband's family. They've mistreated me our entire relationship, and classic them, they now want to see my husband for the holidays. My husband is being extremely effing rude about it and being rude to my mother even though she's been an angel sent from heaven for our situation. What the F do I do? I'm pregnant with my B card and my boyfriend thinks I cheated. Yeah, pretty much exactly what the title says. I, 16 female, have my B card, so does my boyfriend, 16 male. We're both young and neither of us are ready to go all the way. Personally, it's never been high on my radar, and from what he's told me, he's the same way. That being said, we've been together for a couple of years now, so things have still happened. I'd rather not go into detail on that, but you can get the picture. Think third base, I guess. Anyways, a couple of days ago, I went to the doctor because I've been feeling really sick lately. I did a urine test and finger prick, and my doctor told me I was pregnant. Of course I laughed at first because I thought she was joking, but no, I'm really pregnant. I kind of fell silent. She started talking about things like ultrasounds, prenatal vitamins, etc., but I cut her off and told her that wasn't possible because I'd never made love, therefore have never conceived. She explained to me that very few women can get pregnant by outer course, but it's still possible due to lady part anatomy or something. I was and still am in complete another shock, so I kind of just left without any further explanation. I had driven myself because both of my parents work. I went straight to my boyfriend's house and he was the first person I told. I hadn't even texted or called in advance because I was crying, completely distraught. I don't know why, but it didn't even cross my mind that he would think I cheated. I would never do something like that. I explained everything to him about how we'd never technically had made love, but we got really close and stuff can happen. He seemed pretty lost until I eventually told him I was pregnant, which is when he rightfully got pissed at me because how in the world does that even happen without us having had gone all the way? I tried so hard to explain myself and assure him that I'd never do that, ever. I told him I'd take a DNA test or something to prove that, but he didn't believe a word and made me go home. The last thing he told me was, I really trusted you. He looked like he was about to cry. Now I'm blocked on everything, so I can't text or call explaining myself. I'll respect his decision if he wants to break up, but I need him to know I was never with anyone else. It's been killing me knowing how hurt he must feel. Luckily, he hasn't told anyone that I'm pregnant because I haven't even told my own parents yet, but he has told people that I cheated on him and now I'm losing friends and everything's gone to crap. This was already the lowest point of my life and it seems to be getting worse. I've basically locked myself in my room. I feel so depressed. I just need him to know.
My wife's schedules are nasty time. I have been with my wife for 15 years and married for 9 years. Together we have 2 kids. So we both have very busy schedules because we both work. It has affected our intimacy and romantic life a lot. I noticed she has been ignoring us and our intimacy life was dead. There was no romance left. I addressed this issue with her. We sat down and had a talk about it. I explained my side of the story, that I am feeling neglected in our marriage and we need to do something about it. She apologized and told me she has been really busy with work and doesn't have time. We talked and came to the conclusion that we will make time for each other more often. First thing that weirded me out was when she asked for my schedule. After that talk, things went back to normal. We got a sitter and went out on dates more often. We have intimacy more often. It used to be once a month, or when I had this conversation with her we didn't have intimacy for 5 months straight. But we have been doing it 2 to 3 times a week now. She is way more spontaneous and initiates more. I do the same. This has been going on for 4 months. I am glad for it. So recently, I discovered something. I called in sick for work because I had a cold. My wife didn't take the day off because I told her I will be fine. I was around my wife's workstation to look for a pen. I noticed a planner on her desk. It was very detailed. So basically she planned everything, right from when we have intimacy to when we should go out on dates. They were like Tuesday, 10 p.m., have intimacy. It is as if she was describing her time with me as if it is another chore she has to do. She also made spreadsheets about how much time she spends with me, the kids, herself and her work. Moreover, she has a binder full of stuff about us. Like our favorite food, our birthdays, appointments, things we like and want, etc. It just made me feel unworthy that we are not even important enough for her to remember those things from the top of her hat. I think, if you love someone you should know almost everything about them without keeping a binder or reminder that you have to love them at a specific time. I get she wants to be organized, but are we just a chore to her? I asked my wife about it. She casually replied that she forgets things and is easily distracted. Having binders and schedules or reminders help her remember important things. We had somewhat of an argument about it. My wife snapped and asked, "Why are you being childish? I am trying my best to keep romance alive. Do you want me to stop it?" She doesn't understand that it offends me that she has to remind herself to love us and make time for us. Am I the a-hole? Edit, I've been humbled, thank you.
My brother groomed me into a relationship. I was in an intimate relationship with my older half-brother. I don't know how to feel. I never thought I would tell anyone about it, and I honestly thought it was something I would take to the grave. But I couldn't handle the guilt and burden anymore, and I needed to tell someone. I am very close with my parents. Keeping something like this from them was hurting me inside. I broke down and told my mom first. Some context: I have an older half-brother on my dad's side, did not grow up with him, and we basically had no contact with him until around 2019 my dad got in touch with him. He started to come around and rekindle with us. We became close friends quickly when I was around 15 and he was 27. We shared an interest in video games and started to regularly text and game together. Fast forward to 2020-ish, my family and I moved to the city where he lives. He lives with his grandparents. Our relationship became stronger and we were basically best friends, talking every day and seeing each other all the time. I have blocked almost everything out of my mind out of shame and disgust, but basically, our relationship became too close and progressed too far. Conversations became suggestive and intimate. One time, while we were gaming and he was sharing his screen on Discord, he had intimacy videos open on the other tab and I heard it. I basically became his therapist. He confided in me about childhood trauma and his mistakes of the past, broke down and cried in front of me, etc. He introduced me to his friends, told me I was the most important person in his life, and basically put me on a pedestal. During this time, COVID was going on, and having just moved cities and high school being online, I had no friends and did not know anyone. He was pretty much my only companion other than my parents and younger brother. He said he would rather talk to me than any of his friends. We shared everything together. He would tell me about ex-girlfriends and intimate stories, intimate jokes, etc. I admit, I kind of had a stupid crush on him, and it only exacerbated because of the attention he gave me. It made me feel gross. And then one night, it happened. We were watching a movie together on the couch and basically started cuddling. I felt that he was hard. I made the move on him and he reciprocated. The thing is, I hate myself so badly, because I am the one who pursued him, and basically started the physical intimate aspect of the relationship. He took my V card at 16. This sick relationship lasted around 6 months. I told him we should stop more than a couple of times. I felt guilty and like I owed him. He said we were in love. Nobody else would understand and we can't deny our feelings about each other. We had intimacy while our dad was at home and my mom was at work. I realized very quickly that I made a mistake. He was very manipulative and threatened self-unalive and was controlling. After the relationship finally stopped, and we became just brother and sister again, it seemed okay for a while. But then he would bring up that we should talk about what happened and that we are still in love. I hate his guts. Long story short, I am now 19 and was still buddy with him up until a week ago when I broke the news of what really happened between us to my mother. She and my father are supportive, and he is totally cut from our lives from now on. The last time I talked to him, I broke down and cried and asked him why everything that happened. He said, "Isn't this what you wanted? It was both of us, and you're not a bad person. Am I the boss in this situation?" I have been feeling so depressed and crappy. I exposed myself to my parents, and now I think they will never look at me the same. I ruined my brother's life, and he will never see his dad again. I am never going to see him again.
What family secrets were revealed when you became an adult? One of my cousins got into some trouble years ago while he was backpacking overseas. I'm not too close with him, that is, he was never really too close with the family. Once every couple of years he'd show up for Thanksgiving. But besides that, nothing. I didn't have his cell phone number, he wasn't on Facebook. Anyway, I was in high school when my mom announced at the dinner table that Chris effed up really bad, got himself sent to some Russian prison. And everybody at the table was like, "What do you mean, Russia? When did Chris go to Russia?" But maybe we were all a little too enthusiastic, bombarding my mom with a bunch of questions she wasn't really ready to answer. "I don't know," was all she would say. "Well, what do you mean you don't know? He's in Russia?" And she'd say, "That's what I said. Russia. But how did he get to Russia? What did he get arrested for? Was it guns? Or drugs? Is he involved in some sort of organized crime? Does Chris speak Russian? What did Uncle Steve say? Is he going to go to Russia to try and bail him out?" And my mom was like, "I don't know. I don't know.
I don't. I couldn't tell you. I don't know.
All right, okay, I don't know. Why don't you call up your Uncle Steve and ask him?" That was it, really. Everybody got quiet after that. Call up Uncle Steve? That would have been nuts. As it was, we all saw Uncle Steve a little more regularly than we did Chris. But what I mean by that is that Uncle Steve actually showed up to Thanksgiving every single year, whereas with Chris it was always, "I don't know if Chris will be here. Ask Uncle Steve." And Uncle Steve would just be sitting in the corner drinking a Manhattan. So nobody ever went over to ask Uncle Steve. And that was that, for a while anyway. I went away to college. I graduated. I got a bunch of boring jobs. Every once in a while my dad would say something at the dinner table like, "I wonder how your cousin Chris is holding up in Russia." And we'd all get a little excited. "Did you hear something about Chris? Did you ever figure out how he wound up in Russia?" But I think my dad must have only brought that up as a way to get under my mom's skin. Like maybe they were fighting or something before dinner and they didn't get a chance to resolve anything. So they'd both be sitting there. My dad would drop the bomb, "I wonder what Chris is up to." And my mom would get fed up with everyone. "I don't know. Stop asking me about Chris. I haven't heard from your cousin in years. A couple of months ago my grandfather died. It wasn't anything sudden. And he was really old, so it was kind of just like, everyone was sad. But it was more of a lament over humanity, over old age than it was over a tragic death in the family." I called out of work. They were like, "How much time do you think you'll need?" Like even they were thinking, "Grandfather, that doesn't sound too devastating. Like everybody's grandparents die. Can you be back the day after tomorrow?" So we're all at the second wake, and like an hour before the funeral home was about to close up shop, guess who walked in? Yeah, it was Chris. And everyone went crazy. "Chris, oh my God, Chris, what's up, man? Where have you been? Were you really in a Russian prison? Jesus Christ, look, Mom, Chris is here." And it was pretty crazy to see him. For the first time all day, it didn't feel like that weird death in the family feeling. And it's like, he was standing there surrounded by everybody. In those first few seconds before he really had a chance to say anything, I was trying to piece it together, how I got from a few minutes ago to where I was right now, and I must have been embellishing it already in my head, but I played it back. It's like I pictured him leaping through those doors. "Hey guys, I'm back." It was unbelievable. "Chris, right here." Finally, everyone let him catch his breath, gave him a little room to explain himself. "Yeah, it's true," he told us. "I got sentenced to prison while I was in Russia. I didn't know I was in Russia exactly. I was backpacking through Eastern Europe with some friends, and then we were on a train, and I couldn't understand anything. I thought we were in Poland or something. So these guards start getting all up in our business one night. We were just having a good time. They start pushing us around, and here I am. I'm thinking this is Poland, or Prague. I'm thinking, these guys won't do poop. I'm an American. What a power trip." So I'm laughing and joking and not really cooperating at all. And then finally these guys take their guns out, and I don't understand a word, nothing. So I just put my hands up. We all get carted off. The next thing I know I'm before a judge. There's a big bag of cocaine on the table. I swear, I have no idea. But what am I going to do? How can I get in touch with the ambassador? I never figured it out. That night they had us on a train to Siberia. Effing crazy, right? And my mom shot him a look, like, "What are you cursing for, you idiot?" And he saw it. He said, "Sorry for cursing." I said, "Chris, how'd you make it out?" "What?" He said, "Out of the prison." I got out. The maximum sentence in any Russian prison is like 8 years. Didn't you ever read Crime and Punishment? And no, I never read Crime and Punishment. I think I was supposed to 1 year for school, but I don't even think that the teacher read Crime and Punishment. "Did you get beat up or anything like that? I can't believe you still have all of your teeth. You actually look pretty good." And he said, "Why wouldn't I look good? Those Russian prisons have a bad rap. Those guys aren't so bad. You just have to know how to deal with them. All of those prisoners, criminals, political prisoners, they're also used to being pushed around by the state, bullied their entire lives. You know how you deal with someone like that? You stare them down. You hold your ground." No. Nobody messed with me over there. I was like an honorary guard. Let me tell you something about Russians, Chris. It was Uncle Steve. I hadn't even said hi to him. "Let's go now." And that was it. They both said goodbye and left. We all hung around until they blinked the lights off and on and kicked us out. Afterward we went back to my parents. We were all still going crazy about Chris, talking about Chris. "Mom, when did Chris get back? Did you know he was coming? Did Uncle Steve ever tell you anything about any of that prison stuff? Did that really happen? When did he get out?" Mom. But she wasn't having it. It was all, "I don't know. Look, I don't know. You should have asked Uncle Steve, because I don't know." And my dad was finally like, "Enough already, enough. Leave your mother alone. She's got a lot to deal with the funeral tomorrow. Her dad just died. Enough about Chris." And everyone got quiet. But after a couple of minutes, my brother Phil breaks the silence. "Is he coming for Thanksgiving?" And I had his back. I said, "Yeah, Mom. Did you ask him about Thanksgiving?"
What's the worst date you ever had? Met a girl online, everything seemed okay and the conversations were good, so a few days later we decided to meet for coffee and go for dinner later. I show up to the cafe about 45 minutes early and order a coffee, intending to read for a bit. While I'm reading I notice an older fella staring and taking far too much interest in me before leaving. Odd, but okay. Continue to read until about 10 till meet up when I text the girl that I'm already at the cafe. Shortly after, the odd older fellow comes back in one entrance, and this sets off my spidey sense, so I'm making my way to the other entrance when my date catches my arm to say hi. I tell her we should step out for a minute, getting a bad vibe from this guy. She asks which one, so I describe him. It's her goddamn dad, doing advanced recon for her dates at 24 years old. I was a bit sketched out at that, but thought maybe she had some bad dating history that possibly made sense. I meet her dad. He says they wanted to make sure I was who I said I was and to enjoy the date. He leaves and she says being an only child has its downsides. Makes enough sense. We get coffee and chat for a bit, walk in a nearby park and decide where to go for dinner. We get to my car and she asks if I could take her home to grab a jacket before dinner. No big deal. We arrive at her place, lives with parents, and I talk to her mom and dad while the date grabs a jacket. They seem nice, but overbearing parents. Date calls me back to her room to meet her cat, and the entire time I'm meeting her cat, the parents are hawking nearby, obviously eavesdropping, and it's obvious the date is dragging her feet for some reason. I said something about getting out to dinner before the rush and her parents, who happened to be walking by, ask where we were going before they start a dialogue on local restaurants, which pivots to ordering delivery carryout and how we should just do dinner together at their place. I told them no offense, but I'd greatly prefer to dine in someplace relaxed and get to know their daughter. They seem really resistant to this. I'm agitated, and ask if this is how her dates normally go. They said no, normally we don't let her go out with men, but you passed the background check and your messages to her made you seem nice, like you'd have dinner with us. I was flabbergasted. They ran a background check on me, read our exchanges online as well as the advanced recon, and expected me to have dinner with 2 additional people I hardly knew when I was expecting a date. I told them that will absolutely not work for me, and that they are being extremely over the top with their expectations and precautions. I left. Later received a torrent of text messages and calls to the general sentiment of you were supposed to be better than this. I don't respond for a day before telling her that this is not normal or healthy. I refuse to be any part of it and will be blocking their number and filing restraining orders if I find them lurking around.
I met a stranger today and he improved my life with one simple sentence. I wanted to share a heartwarming story that recently happened to me. Sometimes, life surprises us in the most unexpected ways, and this is one of those instances. A few weeks ago, I was sitting in my favorite coffee shop, engrossed in my laptop, and sipping on my usual cappuccino. The place was bustling as usual, but my attention was soon drawn to a man sitting at the table next to mine. He seemed to be struggling with something and was clearly having a rough day. After a while, he sighed and muttered to himself, "I can't believe I'm doing this." He then looked over at me, perhaps not realizing that I could hear him. I decided to strike up a conversation and asked if everything was okay. He hesitated for a moment but then began to share his troubles. It turned out that he was a freelance writer who had hit a creative wall. He was on a tight deadline and was struggling to find inspiration. We got to talking about our shared passion for writing, and I offered some tips and encouragement. I shared my own experiences with writer's block and how I'd overcome it in the past. Usually, I would consume as much media as possible and hope that somebody's life inspires me to write about anything and everything. It always works, actually. We spent hours at that coffee shop, talking about writing, sharing stories, and even helping each other brainstorm ideas. It was amazing how that chance encounter had blossomed into a deep connection. We exchanged contact information and made plans to meet up again. Fast forward to today, and this man has become one of my closest friends. We've collaborated on various writing projects, attended writing workshops together, and even co-authored a short story that got published in a local magazine. More than that, we've been each other's sounding boards and sources of motivation during those inevitable creative slumps. It's incredible to think that a simple act of reaching out to someone in a coffee shop could lead to such a meaningful friendship. This experience has taught me that there are potential friends, mentors, and confidants all around us if we're willing to take the chance and strike up a conversation.
I accidentally punched a customer in her breast. I'm a bartender in a dive bar with an incredible kitchen. Almost everything is from scratch. It's a really cool neighborhood bar with a very diverse clientele, and a very diverse menu of amazing food. Last week, I'm working my Sunday brunch shift, and we had a reservation of 10 people coming in for brunch at 11 a.m., right when we opened. The first 2 to 3 people in the party arrive, and I inform them that their table is all set up with menus, water, and silverware. They ended up ordering a few drinks at the bar while they waited for the rest of their party. Soon after, another 2 to 3 people come in, approach the bar, and mention that they are meeting friends for brunch. I ask if they're here for the party of 10 and they confirm. I started to say, "We have a table set up for you right over there," and started to turn toward the table, sticking my arm out to point at the table when another member of their party happened to be walking past the drawbridge, coming from right out of my field of vision. With absolute perfect timing, I punched her right in the titty. Absolutely horrified. I begin to apologize profusely as she recoils, clutching her chest. I am, obviously, mortified as a 6-foot, 200-pound male, and she being a woman in her mid-40s who was significantly smaller than me. I continue to apologize saying that I didn't see her and it was bad timing. I offered to buy her first drink, and also a shot of her choice. She accepted my apology and the free drinks. She and the rest of the table ended up paying without incident. They tipped appropriately, and left seemingly happy after some gentle, and well-deserved, ribbing me for my funny, slightly mortifying mistake.
Make-A-Wish employees. What was the most strangest thing a Make-A-Wish kid asked for and actually received? My friend's an aquarist and she told me about one 17-year-old cancer patient who had a wish to smell a sea lion's breath before he died. He had read it was the worst thing ever and was just curious to experience it for some reason. Plus he liked sea lions, I guess. She was of course pretty shocked by the request and said, "Are you sure? I promise you really don't want to smell it. I always make sure to hold my breath if I'm getting that close," but he insisted and it was arranged. He puked and didn't enjoy it very much. A funeral. He knew his parents wouldn't be able to afford one, so he wished to have his funeral paid for. They were able to convince him to make another wish and he wished for gold lockets for his mom and sister with his initials engraved on them. My wife worked as a nurse at a children's hospital and cared for a 17-year-old cancer patient whose wish was to meet Wiz Khalifa. He showed up and spent the day. My wife said they went on a walk and came back up as balls. She said it was a great day for the boy and his family. He passed away a few weeks later. Friend's son wanted a spider costume. Not a Spider-Man costume. Spider. It was the day before Halloween. A volunteer stayed up all night and made him the costume.
My drug addict coworker tried to stab me at work, so I got him arrested and sued with my job. I am a 21-year-old guy, and I just recently became certified in an industry that is mainly full of older guys. At the job I just got hired at, I am at least 20 years younger than all my coworkers, and it's definitely a challenging environment to be in. I was able to graduate from trade school early since I invested more hours than were required for my certification, and I'm super confident in my skills related to my field since I spent lots of extra time studying and practicing while I was still in school. Anyway, recently I got hired into a very well-paying position that most guys have to wait years for, but I'm just grateful to lock a job in my field down so quickly. Everything has been great, and my supervisors have been really happy with my work so far. Mostly everyone at my job likes me, all except for my one problematic coworker, Adam. He's been at the job forever, but he's sort of a nasty, shady guy. I've heard some of my coworkers talking about how he apparently has a bad pill addiction, and that he's made mistakes on the job before since he was nodding off. I think he's a cousin of one of the company's owners, and that's the only reason he's kept his job for so long. He seemed to not like me after I got hired, but I managed to stay out of his way until recently. A promotion opened up in my department, and it looked like it would be given to Adam since he was next in line for a promotion and he was related to the owner. Everyone was shocked when I came in one day and got promoted over him. My bosses said it was because of my exemplary job performance. I was pretty happy about it, but later on that day my coworkers and I were just shooting the poop in the parking lot and a lot of them were congratulating me. That's when Adam appeared out of nowhere and started marching over to us. I noticed as he got closer that his eyes were bloodshot. He started cursing me out for getting the promotion over him, and he even tried to take swing at me before our coworkers restrained him. Little did I know this would only be the start of Adam's attempts of revenge on me. My drug addict coworker tried to stab me at work, so I got him arrested and sued with my job. After being attacked by my coworker who was high off his A in the parking lot of my own job, I went back inside to tell my bosses what had happened. I heard Adam outside still screaming and I asked them to call the cops. They insisted we shouldn't call the cops since it might keep them there all night, but they wrote up and had me sign an incident report. I waited a long time until I walked back to my car. No one seemed to care about how scared I was feeling and I felt grateful to make it home alive that night. When I got home I was pretty shaken up, and I was scared since they hadn't said anything about keeping Adam away from me. I would learn the next day just how disturbed Adam was and how far he was willing to go to get back at me. The next morning, I found out that Adam had been put on leave without pay. Apparently, he had caused a real scene when they told him. I asked my supervisors if they thought he would escalate and if I was in danger, but they just said they were sure it would be fine and he wasn't some crazy guy. I was an idiot for trusting them, and it ended up costing me. About a week after Adam initially attacked me, I was walking back to my car after my shift one night, when I suddenly heard the noise of someone running up on me from behind. It happened so fast and it was horrifying. 1 second I was hearing his footsteps, then his fast breath behind me, and finally I felt a blade pierce my skin. Adam had run up on me and stabbed me in the parking lot of my work. He had stabbed me once in the back and I felt the knife enter my torso. He took it out and tried to stab me again, but I grabbed the blade and managed to stop him even if just for a second. I think he must have been high again, because I somehow managed to wrangle the knife out of his hands before some other coworkers noticed the commotion and started running over. He tried coming at me with his fists right before they got to him and held him back. I still had adrenaline pumping, so I tried to jog away and I called the cops myself that time. It was a whole ordeal. When they got there and I told them the full story, they reamed my bosses and said that they effed up not calling them the first time he attacked me. One cop even pulled me to the side while the EMTs were treating me and told me that I had grounds to sue for workplace endangerment. I hadn't even considered suing, but after I got treated at the hospital and my adrenaline wore off, I felt all the awful pain of my stab wound and decided I would get payback since my work could have prevented this. I pressed charges on Adam and I found a lawyer to help me sue my workplace. He said I had a strong case since there was an official incident report on his first attack and that proved they didn't call the cops and didn't do all they could to protect their employees. It sucked a little bit because I really liked my job, but I think I'd prefer to work somewhere where I didn't get stabbed in the parking lot.
I was forced to tell my daughter she could not use her sister's insulin pump and I am torn. I have two daughters, both with diabetes. One of them is in 5th grade and the other is in 7th, but she also has been diagnosed with autism, and they both use insulin pumps. And my younger daughter, who in the more recent years got diagnosed with diabetes, has a newer kind of insulin pump. It's a bit more compact and takes up less space. And because of that, my youngest daughter asked if she could decorate her pump with paint. I didn't know, so I asked her doctor if it was okay. Her doctor said it was fine as long as it's not on anything that is like open wires or something, and it's just on the outer case, so I said it was okay. But her older sister was quite angry at the fact that she couldn't do it to her pump. I ended up asking her doctor about it, and he said because of the way that the pump is modeled, it would be quite hard for her to paint on it, without getting it in somewhere that would possibly harm the pump. She was livid. She threw a whole fit, and when it ended up being time for me to change out the needle and the insulin of the pump, my older daughter asked if just for a little bit they switched pumps. I said no, not only could that be dangerous, but there are two completely different models after I explained this to her. Her younger sister also said that she wouldn't want to switch anyways cause she had decorated it herself and she was really proud. And when she got even more angry and started throwing things, I tried to reason with her and say, what if it was the other way around and you had just decorated your pump and then your younger sister asked if they could switch when you were not very happy? She counteracted by throwing the pump at me, breaking it into pieces and saying couldn't do it anyways because it was an older model and quote, apparently that means I cannot do fun things. At this point I was done with her fit, so I closed the bathroom door and left her in there to calm down while I finished switching out the pump for her younger sister. I said to her younger sister, I'm sorry, your sister can be overwhelmed sometimes and that's why she had been acting like that, but it's not an excuse for her actions. I also told her that I would not take away her pump and give it to her sister just because her sister wanted it, because that wouldn't be fair, and then that once her sister calmed down she would give her an apology. And then her younger sister said it's okay and she understands because sometimes she can get overwhelmed when she doesn't get things she wants to. Once I finally stopped hearing her older sister bang things around and cry hysterically, I went up there and asked if she was okay. She replied with a slight head nod. And I continued to tell her that she owed her sister an apology and that she also owed me an apology for breaking her insulin pump. She looked at me like I was crazy and then said, I will not give you an apology. It is your fault that I can have a cool pump like my younger sister and that you favored her all the time. I will give my sister an apology though, because I shouldn't have been mad at her and I shouldn't have asked for her pump. I am proud of her for acknowledging that she shouldn't have yelled at her sister or asked for her pump, but I'm also still upset with her at the fact that she won't accept that it's not my fault that she has an older model of an insulin pump. That's just what she got when she got diagnosed. Lately I've been starting to feel guilty for not at least letting her try to do something with their insulin pump since it was old and we needed a new one anyways. My husband has also expressed that he doesn't think it was acceptable for me to deny because he was going to buy her a new one soon anyways, and I knew that. Multiple family members had said pretty much the same thing, but others have also said that it wasn't okay for her to act like that and that they were on my side, and I'm torn.
What is the pettiest complaint someone made about you? My mother became terminally ill and needed skilled nursing care. I took leave from my job abroad and stayed at her condo so I could visit her daily until she passed. As soon as I arrived, her elderly neighbor lady, seeing that a young person was now staying next door, would call once or twice a week telling me to turn down my music. In light of the circumstances, whenever I wasn't at the care home with my mom, I was sleeping or cooking or reading with no music or TV. Each time she called, I politely told her I had no music on, and that there wasn't a radio or stereo in the unit. When my mom passed, my aunt and uncle from out of state came and stayed with me through the funeral. I can tell you, my uncle was no shrinking violet. When the complaint call came and he answered the phone because I was not home, the neighbor proceeded to tell him how she's ill and hasn't been able to rest because of my loud music. I'm certain that the profanity-laden tongue lashing my uncle gave her is what prompted her to start calling the HOA instead of me to complain about my loud music. I honestly think she assumed I was noisy because of my age. When the HOA president came to the door to tell me the neighbor was complaining about the music, I invited her to come in to inspect the condo for the alleged blasting stereo and explain that the neighbor had been harassing me about loud music since I started staying there, despite the fact there was no radio or stereo in the condo. That evening, a second tongue lashing was delivered, this time by the HOA president, who told the neighbor in no uncertain terms to leave me alone. She stopped complaining about the music, but switched to complaining about how I parked the car, where I set my trash can, etc. I sold the place shortly after my mom passed, and actually got a call from this neighbor about how I sold it too cheaply and lowered her condo's value. I told her that she was the reason I sold below market value, and I honestly would have taken less that I did just to get away from her. Never missed an opportunity to complain, that one. I'm pregnant. I had always known that I wanted to be a mother someday. I had dreamed of it since I was a little girl, of having a house full of children and a husband who loved me and our family. But I never expected it to happen like this. I was in my mid-20s when I found out I was pregnant. I had been with my partner for a few years and we had talked about starting a family, but it still felt like a complete shock. I was scared and uncertain of what this meant for our future. I had always been the type of person who was independent, career-focused and driven. I had worked hard to get where I was and I was scared of what having a baby would mean for my life. Would I be able to continue working? Would I be able to keep up with the demands of motherhood? I was also scared of how my partner would react. We had talked about having children, but I was still uncertain of how he would feel about the news. Would he be excited or scared? Would he be supportive or resentful? We decided to keep the news to ourselves for a while, and I spent the next few months trying to process my own emotions and prepare for the changes that were coming. I was scared, but I was also excited. I knew that whatever happened, my life was about to change in a big way. I finally told my partner the news and he was ecstatic. He was so excited to become a father and he was so supportive and understanding of my fears and doubts. We decided to take it one step at a time and start preparing for the future. The months that followed were filled with excitement and anticipation. We talked about names, nursery decorations, and all the things that come with having a baby. We were both so excited for the changes that were coming in the future that we were building together. As the days passed, my pregnancy progressed and I started to feel the baby move inside me. It was a magical moment, one that I will never forget. The day finally came when I gave birth to our beautiful baby girl. I held her in my arms and felt a wave of emotions wash over me. I was filled with joy, love, and a newfound sense of purpose. My life had changed in a way I never could have imagined. I had gone from an independent career woman to a mother in the blink of an eye, but I wouldn't have it any other way. My partner and I looked into each other's eyes and knew that our lives had changed forever. We were now a family and the future was more exciting than ever.
My mooching brother tricked our mom into not paying his rent and refused to pay his bills. So, my mother finally went nuclear and gave him a lesson. Brother has been mooching off of my mom and I. She and I co-own our house since 2017. He lived rent-free for 4 years. Finally, my mom managed to force him to pay his form of rent by paying some utility bills in 2021. He has never paid his bills willingly. Every month he demands to know why he has to pay the amount and demands proof of the cost, as if my mom was trying to swindle him for some reason. And every time he has finally given us the money for the bills, he has told us he was bailing us out since we must be broke. Why else would we be making him pay for us? Recently, he has been going off about how he can't wait to leave the house and he wants to save his money to move out, but he simply can't with the cost of all these bills weighing him down. My mother told him since he is so serious about moving out, she will gladly pay for his portion of the bills. She works seasonally, and all he would need to pay was his car insurance. She said she would give him until May 31st to save up as much as he could. He would then need to move out. Since that agreement was made, the entitled brother has gone on 2 trips out of state. One was a 4-day bachelor party in New Orleans, has gone to poker nights with his friends multiple times, refuses to so much as wash a dish, and leaves a greasy mess wherever he goes in the house. Meanwhile, my mom has worked 6 days a week to make enough money to cover his expenses. And yet, the entitled bro hasn't thanked her once. Every time she asks him to do the simplest task, he ignores her or claims he forgot despite how often she reminds him. Today, she finally snapped. His one bill that he's responsible for was due 4 days ago and he never paid her. She texted him and reminded him verbally many times. She asked via text one last time today and he finally responded by asking her to give him a receipt so she can prove his insurance cost what she claimed it cost, and he never sent the money. She lost it and said she is sick of catering to him without so much as a thank you. She said she wants peace and he is no longer worth the trouble she goes through. She said she is removing him from the car insurance tomorrow and that he no longer has until the end of May to move out because now he is 3 weeks. That's it. She's threatened to kick him out before, and hasn't gone through with it yet, but this time felt different because I have never seen her go nuclear like that before. An entitled bro must have felt that same way because he went through the 5 stages of grief about 100 times during that fight. He screamed, cried, accused, name-called, tried to pull me in to defend him, tried to pull in his dad to defend him, tried to call my mom's sisters to defend him, claimed getting his own insurance was an emotional burden, claimed she needs professional help because she is obviously out of her mind, said that she obviously doesn't care about him. Otherwise, why would she so cruelly deprive him of such valuable resources? He went on and on for 3 hours, and she didn't budge. I don't want to get my hopes up that she'll stick to that 3-week deadline, but this is the closest she's come to evicting him. I hope this will scare him into leaving before she has to.
I made my horrible roommate's life hell. This happened in 2008 to 2009, but I thought this community would appreciate the story. In 2008 I had just left my husband. I caught him cheating multiple times, and I was just over it. A new girl, we will call her Amy, started at my job and we made a fast friendship. I was in the middle of packing up and moving out of my house. I needed a roommate for a new apartment I was looking at because my wages weren't going to pay the bills. So we move in together and live peacefully together for a while. I was moving on with my life. I had gotten better paying job, was spending time with my friends, and I felt okay with life at the time. At the time I was 25, single, and not looking for anything serious, so I had a friend who would stop over a few times a week for some adult fun. Amy was cool with it on the surface. It did not affect her in any way. My friend didn't hang out at our place. He didn't eat at our place. He didn't use our household supplies. My relationship with him affected her exactly 0%, but I guess she was a little green about the fact that I was getting some attention and she was not. She would flirt with him, go visit him where he worked, etc., but he absolutely not interested in her. This is where things started to go downhill. For context, she had been married a few times, she was 13 years older than me, and the dads had full custody of their respective kids. She was dating someone but he was already in a relationship, so he wasn't about to commit to anything besides stopping by for 30 minutes after he worked the night shift every day. I tried to point out all the red flags, but she was convinced it was love. This dude used to hit on me constantly in front of her. He was very open about being in a committed relationship with his girlfriend, so I have no idea why Amy thought this was going anywhere. After a few months I met someone I wanted to be serious with, so we started dating. We will call the guy Tom. Tom and I got serious pretty fast. He was living in a horrible situation, so he moved in with Amy and I pretty quickly. I think it was after about a month of dating. So we have our room and she has her own room. The bills went from 50-50 to 33/33/34 to make sure things were still even. We had a shared kitchen, LR, and bathroom. After Tom moved in, she started openly hitting on him in front of me. Every guy I had at my house, even just friends, she had to hit on. None of them ever took her up on it. Every single one turned her down, and I think this added greatly to her oncoming behavior. Over the next couple of weeks Amy did a complete 180. She stopped paying rent, refused to buy any food, and would just eat whatever Tom and I bought, would not wash her dishes. We had 2 cats, one hers and one mine, and she would never clean the litter in her room, so her cat would use our hallway floor as a bathroom every single day. Every day when I got home from work there was a big steaming pile of cat poop right inside my front door, sitting in the middle of a giant puddle of urine. My cat was locked in my room at night with her own supplies, so there was zero chance it was her. It was the same thing every morning by the front door. Whenever she was done eating the food she stole from me, she would set her plate with the leftovers on the kitchen floor for her cat to pick at. She would leave the plate there for days. To the point that if I didn't pick them up, there would be multiple plates on the floor with food in various stages of decay. All of my dishes started going missing, except for the cat's plates, of course. And what dishes were left, she refused to wash ever. She used my toilet paper, my laundry soap, even my tampons. This went on for about 2 months and it just kept getting progressively worse. She would use panty liners every day and would change them multiple times a day and stuff them in the garbage can in the bathroom. She would leave it there completely overflowing and spilling onto the floor for days until I caved and put on gloves and threw them out. The can would be full in about a week, so this happened a few times. That's not even the worst of it. My expensive DSLR went missing. I was a photography hobbyist at the time, but it was my dream to be a professional photographer and own my own photography business. I would shoot stuff for friends and family as practice, and one day I grabbed my camera bag from the shared living room, and as soon as I picked it up, I felt my heart sink into my stomach. You know that instant dread that grips you the second you realize something truly gut-wrenching has happened. I opened the bag and of course the camera is gone. That was an expensive camera for that time of my life, and it was a gift from my parents, so I was truly devastated. I couldn't prove a thing and I wasn't even sure how long it had been missing. It could have been her boyfriend that took it, but either way it was gone. So now this is it. This is the last straw. I need this idiot out. I went from nice girl to psycho in about 30 seconds. I'm not the violent type and I hate confrontation. I'm not waiting for eviction to go through, and I really didn't have the money for that anyway, so here's where I start my petty revenge. Amy wants to live here with me rent-free, stealing my stuff, hitting on my boyfriend, and neglecting her cat. So be it. But it's going to be on my terms. One vital piece of information: in my divorce, the jerk moved back in with mommy and I took everything from the house to my new apartment, so I owned everything and the lease was in my name. I started by changing the Wi-Fi password and the computer password. The following week I had my cable company come and remove the cable lines to her room. I bought a small fridge for my room and a cabinet and put all my food and personal supplies in my bedroom and put a secure lock on my door. When her cat crapped on the floor, I would pick it up and smear it on her bedroom door knob. Overflowing bathroom trash cans filled to the brim with her panty liners were dumped on her bed. I removed the knobs to the washer and the dryer. I did everything possible to make her life uncomfortable. I did other small stuff. Anything that came to mind. A few months prior, Amy and I had been working at the same store and she borrowed another coworker's laptop. She ended up getting fired, but she never gave the laptop back and the coworker was really trying to get it back from her. Amy ghosted her, of course, so while she was out one day, I went in and took the laptop and gave it back to its rightful owner. Amy called the cops on me and said I stole her computer, but I explained what happened. She admitted to the cops that the computer wasn't hers and the cops said it wasn't their problem anymore. That one really made her hate me. She wasn't working at the time, so it's not like she had money to do anything or buy anything. She was literally just existing in room in my apartment. She would disappear during the day, but I have no idea where she was going. She moved out after about 6 weeks. When she moved out of my apartment, I didn't even know she had left. I just noticed she wasn't coming or going for about a week. So Tom and I cleaned out her room. She left clothes, broken furniture, a cardboard dresser, and 5 39-gallon garbage bags of trash we collected from the mass piles of panty liners, rotting food, and ordinary trash we found in the room. It's a miracle we didn't have roaches. I found all my missing dishes, silverware, and cups all covered in food and grossness. I just threw it all away. I wish I still had the photos though. Oddly enough, about 6 months later, I opened my back door to take out the trash and my camera was in a bag hanging from my doorknob. I know Amy definitely didn't return it. For about 2 years after, every time I would find out that Amy was living with someone new, I would message them and send them the photos of her room. Papers in the trash that had her name on them. And I would tell them the whole story. One time it caused the people she was living with to throw her crap out on the porch. She had just moved in and they had small kids and they didn't want to risk it with her. I stopped after that. She knew it was me telling them too, so I figured I had sufficiently made my point. As a waiter or waitress, what was the most ridiculous complaint a customer has told you? I was working as a manager at an Ask in the UK, East Midlands, exact location shall remain anonymous. I had a party booked in, around 10 to 15 at around 9 p.m, which is fairly late for such a large group. At about 8:50 p.m. two of the party arrive and I explain that I am still waiting for one table to leave so that I can set up their table. The last table in the section was right in the middle of where I needed the large table and had been there around 4 hours. The two people from the party were polite, if not slightly drunk, and said they would return to the pub next door and wait. I took a phone number and said I would call when the table was ready. At 9:05 p.m. the previous table had their bill as two more of the party arrived. These two were just as drunk but less friendly. I tried to explain that the previous customers were about to leave and the table will be ready shortly. This was met with a tirade of abuse and ended with them storming off after shouting, "We don't want it anymore. We're not eating here." Another 20 minutes or so go by and by this time I have given 2 tables away in this section as I was fairly sure that they would not return. I was wrong. The entire party shows up demanding to be seated immediately. They are all fairly drunk, some are polite and trying to calm the ones who are not. I explained that the guys who I spoke to last had said they would not be coming, which they denied. I managed to sort out the table by asking several other customers to move and I think they felt sorry for me as they obliged very quickly. Once seated I continued to receive choice words, micro-regressions and rudeness from most of the group as I took a drinks order. Once I had taken the drinks order, one of the nicer, more sober members of the group came to me and asked if I could, by way of a gesture, give them some champagne as an apology. I agreed, not that I felt that I owed them an apology but simply to keep the peace. The meal continued with the same rude, aggressive manner, but it was when it came for them to pay that it got even worse. I presented the bill with a 20% discount and made a quick exit. One of the part came to the till and very aggressively told me that my attempt to buy them with champagne and 20% was pathetic and that none of us asked for champagne and we don't even like it. It was all gone. At this point I refused to take any more off the bill. I had just about as much as I was willing to take and was ready to call the police. They must have sensed this and decided to pay and leave, but not before one last parting gift. One of the more quiet and polite members of the group, a lady, came to me and said, "I've just had a baby and this was my first night out since giving birth and you have ruined it for me. I no longer work in the industry." What's a random act of kindness you did but never bothered to tell anyone about it? I used to work at Starbucks, so one day this old lady comes in. I've never seen her before, but she seems a little down in the dumps. This is not my typical "I'll be paying with my daddy's credit card" customer, so I'm a little more inclined to see what's going on. I ask her how her day is going, and she tells me she's fine. She orders a cup of coffee. I can tell she most definitely is not okay. Something's definitely off. I quietly ask her if she's sure she's doing all right. She looks up at me from her purse with tears in her eyes and, voice quivering, says, "No, son, I'm not. My husband is dying and I'm trying to learn how to live without him." I come to learn her husband did everything for her. He kept up the house. He pumped the gas. He was Prince Charming. And now he was dying. My heart just broke right there. I poured her a cup of coffee and handed it to her. She went to reach into her wallet, but I told her it was on the house. This woman looked at me and burst into tears. The store is virtually empty at this point, so we have some more time with her. My manager gives her a hug and the woman tells me it was the sweetest thing anyone has ever done for her. It wasn't any big deal. I just gave her a cup of coffee. It cost me nothing. I just didn't charge it. But the story doesn't end there. Later that afternoon I get a call from the afternoon shift manager. She just got a phone call from a 20-something-year-old girl who asked about me. She said that her grandma, the woman I had served that morning, had come and told her granddaughter about our exchange. This girl was singing our praises big time, saying we changed this lady's entire perspective on the situation. I was absolutely floored and got a little choked up. But we're still not done. 3 weeks later, I'm working a Sunday morning. It's right between 2 rushes and this giant group comes in. Big groups are always a pain to serve, but I put a smile on and get ready to take care of everyone. An older lady comes up to me and grabs my hand. She asks me if I remember who she is. It's the lady from 3 weeks before. I ask her about her husband and she responds, "Well, that's what I'm here about. Son, I have 2 things to share with you this morning. First, I want you to know that my husband passed away. His funeral was yesterday and the whole family came into town for the service. The second thing I want to share with you is this. I want you to know that I shared the story of what you did for me with that cup of coffee. You may not know this, but that cup of coffee gave me an entirely new perspective on my husband's life. I wanted to thank you for that. Son, I want to introduce you to my family. They have something they want to say to you." She turns around and gestures to the group. One by one, they come up to me and shake my hand and thank me for what I've done. At this point everyone is teary-eyed. It was the strangest thing. A cup of coffee changed everything. And, in the process, allowed me to celebrate the life of a stranger I never knew with her loved ones. What massively improved your mental health? Exercising. The people I've known struggling with problematic mental health issues don't exercise and won't try it. I wish they knew it could help a lot. I use Do Not Disturb on my phone so I don't wake up from unnecessary texts and calls. I've also read this saying that says other people's emergency is not your emergency. I try to implement the saying since I'm an anxious person. I stopped socializing. I just do what I want now with my time instead of being bored to death by people and things that don't interest me. A large black cat named Chonk. I stopped lying to myself and other people. I came to terms with who I was. I found that practicing mindfulness and meditation has significantly improved my mental health. It's helped me become more aware of my thoughts and emotions, allowing me to better manage stress and anxiety. Highly recommend giving it a try. Drinking lots of water, getting lots of sunlight, and plenty of exercise. Taking vitamin D3 shifted my mood a ton. I work nights and live in a very cloudy area, so it worked like magic on me. $1 billion, I mean I didn't get $1 billion but I'm 100% sure it would improve my mental health. Divorce. It's a lot easier to stand up when you don't have someone constantly knocking you back down. Getting into photography and spending lots of time outside. Instead of spending too much time on social media and the news. I stopped caring about others who cause me any amount of pain or discomfort. I'm the star, I'm the main character, everyone else can follow me or stay out of my way. Wanking every day. Not kidding because it does wonders. Working from home. Challenging myself constantly and feeling comfortable in a job. Time to move up, move out, or change something about the job or introduce study or something. Steady achievement really helps when something shitty happens. Super important to build resilience. Doesn't have to be big but succeeding at something every day is important. Practicing random acts of kindness and being grateful for what I do have and not focusing on what I don't. Maintaining excellent relationships with my wife, family, friends and colleagues. I stopped paying so much attention to news and politics because it's not my job to solve all the world's problems, and getting upset over something you can't control is useless. What is the most backstabbing thing a friend has ever done to you? This guy was my closest friend. I lived with him after letting him co-rent a place my mother owned so he could pay lower rent and save up his spare cash. About 6 months in he keeps vanishing at night, giving reasons like I'm going out with work and I'm meeting the lads. Turns out he was sleeping with my girlfriend and didn't have the nuts to confront me about it and talk it through. After months of angry messages I cut my losses and decided to be the bigger man. By this time I've found myself a new girl who is utterly amazing and my best friend is dating my ex-girlfriend. So I put my best foot forward and on a trip around Europe sent him a message telling him I'm happy to put things behind us and when I get back we'll sit down with a couple of the German beers I was bringing back and get back to being mates. I get back home a couple of weeks later and am about to leave my house to go over and see him and my current girlfriend shows up. She sits me down and explains that over the past couple of weeks my friend has been sending her text messages begging her to sleep with him. She shows me the messages and I haven't spoken to the guy since. The urge was to meet him with a baseball bat, but that idea was quickly dismissed as lunacy.
Parents of Reddit, what's the funniest reason you've been called into school to collect your child? My youngest had a slight speech impediment when he was at nursery. He would replace his S's with F's to approximate the sound. I had to have a chat with the head at pickup time because I'd unthinkingly used the phrase "so long suckers" when pulling away from some traffic lights the day before and he liked the sound of it so much he used it himself. I was in an early morning college class and when I got out I realized I had missed calls, texts, and emails from my daughter's preschool. A voicemail said she had been throwing up and to please hurry and come get her. When I got to the school the receptionist showed me to a room where my daughter was sat with a trash can on her lap. She told me my daughter kept announcing she was throwing up and then would cough and spit into the trash can. She had no fever and was otherwise cheerful and talkative. I signed her out, got her outside and into my car where she jumped forward and kissed my cheek and told me she missed me and where would I like to go for lunch. That kid busted herself out of preschool to finagle a lunch date with me. It worked.
I got threatened by a pimp. All because I clicked a corn ad. I am a college student, and like any college student, I am stressed out of my damn mind. I have to fight the urge every day not to get a pretty noose necklace and dangle from our anti-suicide chairs. Want to know my biggest suicide prevention tool? The good old, reliable ancient method called hand banging. Every Friday, like clockwork, I wait until my roommate leaves the room for their 8 a.m. lecture and as soon as they leave, I take out my millimeter defeater and start absolutely unaliving the thing with some lotion and a weirdly intense video of step-siblings getting stuck in various items. This Friday, though, I was too sloppy with my unaliving and clicked one of the pop-up ads on the website. At first, I thought the dark web had put me on their super secret list of idiots to attack first, but then I saw titties, and my mind melted. Yes, I clicked the local MILFs in your area ad. In my corn-obsessed haze, I chose this really hot mom named Glazala, who was about 2 miles from me. I instantly got a message through my number asking me when the best time I could meet Glazala, and I swear my 1 incher increased to 2. An all-time record. That meant I had to meet her, so I told them I could meet her later today after my 2 p.m. African American Studies class. I'm telling you, I happily twiddled my needle and took an extra long shower to make sure I smelt like daisies. When I checked my phone next, I saw a text from a man, who I am assuming is her pimp asking for a prepayment of $100. I got a little nervous at this, but I sent the money over and started to put deodorant and cologne in every crevice of my body. They told me to go to a local hotel alone, so being the idiot I am, I literally skipped to the hotel. When I got there, I immediately got a call from the pimp. He told me he could see me and that I needed to pay $400 up front to be able to pound into this MILF. I was Pissed the hell off, I already paid $100 and I still haven't even seen this chick. So I told him the deal was off and stormed off to try to find a real-life MILF. When I got back to my college, I got a message from the pimp and I just started to freak out. In the text, the pimp sent me a picture of someone's dead hands and said, "This is going to be you unless you pay the $400." I literally ran to the nearest bathroom and locked myself in there. The campus police literally had to come and get me. When I explained it all to him, they asked me, "Did you block him?" Turns out, all I needed to do was block him. Oops.
Life is like a Burger King Whopper. It's filled with an ungodly amount of crap you don't want, but since you already have it, you might as well finish it.
What's the craziest thing you've heard someone say after they thought the phone call had ended but they forgot to hang up? Called a tech support number for a work-related issue during COVID. Guy was clearly at home and could hear a dog whining in the background. He got my error code straightened out. We both said bye, but before I could hang up my phone I heard, "Who's a good boy?" "Are you a good boy?" I said quietly, "I am," then just heard laughing and he said, "I am so sorry." Then he hung up. Frown, I wanted to hear his puppy. I was the third party in this. A coworker failed to hang up properly after a conversation with the boss and promptly went on a very creative expletive-laden rant about the boss and what he should do with himself. As this went on, I received a text from the boss suggesting I should inform the coworker that she'd not hung up. I got coworkers' attention and told them they hadn't hung up. Still in expletive mode, I was asked what made me think that. My response was, I got a text from boss. First time I ever saw color literally drain from someone's face. I was FaceTiming my parents shortly after I started dating my now wife. I'd had quite a dry spell and hadn't dated anyone for a couple years. So I mentioned we were dating on the call and they were happy for me. We ended it and I just put my phone down to grab something without ending the call. Apparently my mom did too, because after a few seconds I heard her say, "Well, I'm glad he's having sex now." Awkward, but also I'm glad my mom is looking out for me. My partner's dad admitted some weird/intimate stuff to me and it's messed me up. My 19F partner's dad, 60M, has been acting really off the past few weeks and has been refusing to talk about it. The other day he was driving me somewhere and said he wanted to talk to me about it, so thinking it would probably help him to get it off his chest, I said sure. One thing to understand about him is he is very spiritual, very into meditation and balancing your energy and all that sort of stuff, so it's making this very confusing and I'm very conflicted about it all. He told me that it all started a few months ago when he walked in on my partner giving me head. He said he saw my pupils dilated as I was clearly sexually aroused and my arms above my head, and he saw my armpit hair and got this overwhelming sense of wanting to bliss me out with oral intimacy, but made it clear that he didn't want to have intercourse with me. He said it wasn't in an intimate way, but a sensual way, because he wanted me to embrace my goddess, spiritual term for inner self, as a sexual/sensual being. On top of all that, he told me that my earthly goddess, physical form, was beautiful, and that he really likes my neck and the shape of my breasts. He claims he just wants me to be confident in myself and not be self-conscious, because I have nothing to be self-conscious about and I'm a beautiful young woman who is more powerful than I realize, and I should carry myself around the world with that knowledge. He admitted that he was ashamed for thinking what he thought and for visualizing it and everything, but that he wanted me to walk away from the conversation feeling good about myself because that's how he intended all of that to come across. I don't think he's talked about it to anyone else and I haven't told my partner yet, partly because I don't know how, but also because I'm still trying to understand it all myself. I trust him and I know he wouldn't do anything to me that I didn't want, but there's just this unease I feel around him now, and he looks at me almost like there's this secret between us and it's really unsettling. I don't want my partner to confront him about it, because what if he takes it the wrong way, or what if I've taken it the wrong way and it was all harmless? I really don't know how I feel about it all. Obviously I'm embarrassed that he's seen me in such a vulnerable position, and the fact that he wanted to bliss me out like that is really weird, but maybe I'm reading into it more than I should and he's just talking about me embracing my goddess and learning to balance my energy. It's been a couple of days since the talk and I'm so confused and I want to tell my partner, but I just don't know how to. I found out about my dad's first family, and I finally get why he acts the way he does. My dad has been very protective of me and my little sister all our lives. He's always been really kind and thoughtful, but there's always been this sadness I couldn't figure out. Like he will smile and laugh, but underneath it there was something always eating away at him. We were never allowed to play outside as kids without being in his direct line of sight, and as we got older, he became more stressed. He hated the idea of us driving and insisted on taking us everywhere, and now that I'll be going to college he won't let me get a car even though I've been saving up for a while. Sometimes it was really frustrating not being able to hang out with friends, and we fought over it a lot. Now I understand why he wants to protect us. Yesterday my sister and I were in the basement doing laundry and we decided to snoop around our old things. We came across an old dusty box and found old DVDs and tapes and photos. We looked at the photos first and it was our dad while he was away in college. For context, we live on the East Coast and our dad went to college in California in the 90s. We were always told that our parents were high school sweethearts who made it work long distance, since my dad got a really good scholarship out west. He came back and they dated more, got married, had me, and the rest is history, or at least we thought. We looked through the first bundle of pictures and they were cool at first. It was of him and his friends, some of which we call aunt or uncle when they visit, because we are so close to them, at the beach in my dad's old Mercedes wagon he had when we were little. But there was this one girl who kept appearing in all of them. The pictures got more intimate, of them cuddling in a dorm room and lying on the grass. This was a shocker at first, since dad was supposed to still be with mom. We picked up another album and our hearts dropped. It was a wedding ceremony, but my mom wasn't putting a ring on my dad's finger. It was this very pretty Asian woman instead of our mom. The other photos of the wedding were people we never knew of or seen. The album kept going and we saw them move into a home and celebrate holidays. Suddenly, in one page this woman we knew nothing of was holding a baby bump which flipped our world upside down. We stopped looking and just sat in silence. There was a possibility we had a sibling out there we never knew of. We brought the box upstairs and looked through it more. We found baby toys and stuffed animals at the bottom of pictures and videotapes. On one of the DVDs, it was addressed to my dad from his wife as a birthday gift in 2002. We put it in our Xbox and watched it. It was like a compilation of all home movies they made. The background song was Real Love by the Beatles and the video was my dad's first family. He was playing with this baby boy on the beach and carrying him like Superman in a park. His smile was different too. He seemed so carefree and happy. He was making silly faces and doing these dance moves he never did with us. There was his wife who played the guitar for our brother and he sat there slapping his hands. The video ended of her and our brother blowing our dad a kiss and wishing him happy birthday. Our dad got home from our grandparents' house and we asked him what was all this. At first he got angry and then broke down crying, which made me feel like crap. I never wanted to hurt him, but to not know we had a brother in the moment hurt too. After a couple hours on the couch and trying to help him, we finally found out why he never told us. My dad met this girl in freshman year of college and they hit it off really quick. They were madly in love for 4 years and after graduation, they got married really young. After a couple months she got pregnant and with her parents' help they bought a home together. Our brother George was born in 2000, 5 years before me. They both named him after George Harrison because they loved the Beatles and that's how they first connected at school during a party. They had 2 happy years until our brother and his mom passed away in a car accident while my dad was at work. He didn't find out until he got home and his father-in-law was there crying his eyes out on the front porch. Dad fell into a depression for months and eventually lost his job in the house. He moved back east and after a while reconnected with our mom who he dated in high school. Eventually I came along and they both promised to not speak about this because it was too painful for him. We all cried until mom got home and she knew the moment she entered the living room why. We all sat and watched the DVD together and held him tight as he let it all out. He eventually started to smile and told us all sorts of wonderful things about our baby brother. I know it's not closure for him, but I saw in his face watching the video that same sense of joy in the old pictures of him. Now we keep a picture of our brother on the mantle and we're gonna visit his grave in the summer. I just wanted to get that off my chest for now. It's just a lot to find out and writing helps me feel better. Doctors, have you ever thought there was no hope for a client? I had to bully my patient into glowing up. In all of my experience as a dentist, I've learned that clean teeth can make or break someone's face. And not just getting veneers and calling it a day, but clean natural teeth can make someone jump from a solid 4 to a 10. A clean smile can even fix the most disgusting looking people, as I recently saw a patient who embodied the picture of awkwardness. He had the worst acne I'd ever seen, an emo haircut, and teeth that made everything look 10 times worse. I cringed looking at him. No one should have to deal with teeth like that. He couldn't even say hi to the receptionist properly, but when he saw me, he lit up and trauma dumped his entire life story to me. He said he didn't have any friends at school since he wasn't confident because of his appearance, but he had a huge crush on the girls' tennis team captain. He said every time he tried talking to somebody at his school, they would call him gross and butter teeth. But when his crush lent him a pencil during class, he decided he needed to take control of his life. She came in the next day with flowers, a huge confetti shooter, and a box of chocolates to ask her out in the perfect way. But when he tried to ask her out, she looked at his teeth and giggled a little, and he was so distracted by her laughter that he dropped the huge confetti shooter on his foot and started crying hysterically. Apparently, everybody pointed and laughed at him, and the girl was embarrassed that he even thought he had a chance with her. He even started tearing up while telling me the story because he'd never felt that low before. He knew he wasn't the best looking, but he didn't realize that the girl he thought would marry him one day couldn't even stand to be near him. So, he came here to see what he could change so that everyone could finally see him differently. I insisted that all he had to do was fix his teeth and he would be set for life. His new smile would make him really confident. He thought I was lying to him, so I told him to look up the missing tooth, missing eyebrow guy. As soon as he saw that image, he was convinced and I started working on his teeth. I asked how they were so stained and yellow, and he said he drank a lot of coffee because he stays up playing Genshin Impact every night. His mouth also smelled awful and it made me gag. I was surprised he wasn't affected by the smell, but he must have gotten used to it by now. I told him his oral hygiene was really bad, so we needed to whiten his teeth and get rid of his bad breath. He asked if I could give him veneers since it was a quick solution, and he didn't want to get made fun of anymore. He said that if better teeth were going to change what little he had left of his teenage years, then he wanted to do it fast. I couldn't give him veneers because that would only cover up the problem, not get rid of it. He wanted to know how he could get white teeth naturally, and my answer to him was that he needed to brush his teeth with toothpastes that don't have harsh chemicals in them because brands like Crest and Colgate, which everybody uses for some reason, have fluoride and hydrated silica. Too much fluoride leads to brown spots in the tooth and weakens it, making it more brittle and easier to chip off. As for hydrated silica, it damages tooth enamel, and using it to brush your teeth is like using sand to clean glass. So, if he thought he was cleaning his teeth every day, he was actually doing more damage and making it far dirtier than before. I told him that just changing to a natural toothpaste with better ingredients would be more effective for him since the standard brands weren't working. Lately, I've only been giving my patients ORL toothpaste because it has xylitol, which reduces the risk of tooth decay by eliminating the bacteria that causes the decay, and avoids all harsh chemicals, including fluoride and hydrated silica. It also has the best taste, which makes it easier for my patients not to go back to their usual sweet toothpaste. But honestly, any toothpaste without harsh chemicals chemicals works. You just have to do the research first to make sure it's actually safe for you. My patient tried arguing with me when he saw that toothpaste costs almost $30, even though people spend thousands on clothes, makeup, and useless fitness equipment. But teeth are the only thing you can never take off. When I explained it to him that way, he accepted the ORL toothpaste, and I scheduled him for a 4-week checkup since that would be enough time for the toothpaste to show some results. 4 weeks later, I actually found him talking with the other people in the waiting room. This was something he had never done before, but he seemed really comfortable talking with everyone. The moment he entered my office, he immediately started ranting about his life, and as soon as he started speaking, I could see, and smell, the difference. This past month, his schoolmates had stopped saying bad things about him, and nobody called him butter teeth since his teeth weren't yellow anymore. And because he was far more approachable now that he was more confident with his appearance, he had some friends who invited him out a lot. Most of his nights were spent partying with them or playing video games. Mind you, he hadn't groomed himself at all and still had acne all over his cheeks and a horrible bowl cut. All he did was fix his teeth with the ORL toothpaste and people were all over him. So, I sent him off with one request: well, everything is fine with you except for that haircut. Please go see a competent barber. Am I the jerk for forcing my mother to see she and my sister are not the same size? Early this year I posted about how my delusional and obese mother was forcing my little sister to wear clothes that were in our mother's sizes. To start off with, my sister finished high school and has gone on to college. But our mother didn't take my sisters growing up well. You see, at first Mom was just acting sad and playing the victim after I'd forced her to see that she and my sister were not the same clothing sizes. Some said I went about it the wrong way by being so blunt by forcing her to see she couldn't fit into a coat my sister can. However, I really don't think there would have been another way to get through to her without involving the authorities. Police, CPS, etc. After the incident, my 45-year-old mom was still dressing in clothes like a teenager at home and binge-eating fast food. And my sister caught her in her room trying to try on her clothes several times. Yes, our mother did destroy a few more pieces of my sister's clothing trying to put them on. But we confronted her each time. Rather than make her previous excuse of stating her belief that my sister and her were the same size, she would just lock herself in her room howling and crying to the point neighbors even once called police to do a wellness check. Of course, when police arrived, I saw a very different side of my mother. She'd put on a nightgown, and did not look like someone who'd just been crying her eyes out. Not only was she pretending to act her age, she lied through her teeth and said that my sister had been the one making those noises because she'd been grounded for tearing up her mother's new clothes. I called this out as an outright lie. And she yelled at me to shut up. The police didn't know who to believe. But nobody was hurt, no threats were being made, and my mother wouldn't stop with the guilting waterworks that her children were so awful to her. So the police just issued a verbal warning and left. As soon as they were gone, my mother told me to get out. And that she didn't want me as a son anymore because I made her feel horrible about herself. I realized then that the loving mother she once was who raised us was completely gone. Eaten by the narcissist before us then. Just a few years prior she was a kind and loving mother. Especially to my sister. But that obviously changed. There was a verbal altercation in which I pointed out to my mom's face how much of a narcissist she was being. Regardless of the size of her clothing, she didn't need to be trying on my sister's clothes. They were not hers. She wasn't even buying my sister clothes anymore. And if she wanted to disown me so badly, then fine. But I would also be disowning her. She threatened to hurt me again, in which point I told her to bring it on. She may be twice my weight, but she is not strong. And if she were to hurt my sister, I'd made damn sure she regretted it. My mother went back to howling and crying in her room after I said that. So I just left, but not before telling my sister to call me if she tries anything else. Crap hit the fan not long after my sister's 18th birthday in May. She went out with friends because our mother had hardly spoken to her in some time. She'd effectively disowned me and gone no contact. And she was just biding her time to kick my sister out too. When my sister came home from her birthday party, she found her stuff in boxes and bags left outside of the apartment she shared with our mother. And there was a note taped to the door telling my sister to leave, and never come back. This would normally be the point where someone might say they were heartbroken. But the truth is that we were prepared for this. We knew Mom wanted my sister out because she refused to take Mom's crap anymore. So she'd been secretly taking her stuff over to her friend's house little by little. This includes her personal documents for her identity. So all of her important stuff was out of there. And our mom just didn't seem to notice. My sister called me, and I came over with my car to start packing up her remaining stuff to take to her friend's house. Since my sister was 18, she could go where she wanted. And her friend's family took her in. And my sister lived happily there while she finished high school, and had a great summer before she and her friend both left for college. They'd applied to the same place, and were accepted. They're some distance away now. But they are happy and living as roommates. But as so often is the case, there was trouble in paradise. I think our mother was hoping to pull some sort of emotional manipulation by kicking my sister out. But it backfired badly since none of us even batted an eyelash about it. So Mom started messaging my sister that she'd cut off her phone plan if she didn't speak to her. My sister responded by getting her own phone with money she earned working part-time, and sent the old phone back to our mother in the mail with a letter telling her off for what she tried to do. Mom didn't take that well. But she no longer had a way of contacting my sister without trying to see her in person. So she came stomping over to my apartment to yell at me and say it was all my fault. Then she demanded my sister's new phone number. I told her to buzz off, because she was no longer my mother. She'd previously made it clear I was no longer her son. And if she didn't leave me alone, I'd be calling police. And then in a complete repeat of what happened on the day I'd forced her to see my sister was not the same size as her, she ran away howling and crying like an animal. But by then I was pretty sure it was all an act. The next thing my mother did was show up at my sister's friend's house. And then started demanding she move back in with her and contribute to rent, because she was paying for a 2-bedroom on her own, and no child support since my sister turned 18. Like me, my sister told her to buzz off. That's when Mom attacked her. She grabbed my sister and started wailing on her while screaming that it was unfair that my sister got to be young, thin and pretty. And that she wasted her youth being a mother. That's about as far as she got before my sister's friend's father took her down. He ripped her off my sister and threw her to the ground. The man is ex-Navy and built like a steamboat. He pinned my mother down and forced her into submission before calling the cops. He referred to her as a screaming whale for the sounds she was making. My sister was taken to the hospital after police arrived and took statements. The Ring doorbell cam on the house had caught the entire fight. So the dad wasn't charged for taking down my mother as he'd reacted in defense of my sister. My sister was lucky and only have some bruises, a black eye, and a bump on the head. Our mother was a heavy woman, but she couldn't fight her way out of a paper bag. Mom ended up in jail, and she used her one phone call to try and guilt me into coming over and paying to have her released. I just said I'm sorry. I don't have a mother. You must have the wrong number. Before ending the call. She didn't ever call me again. My mother bailed herself out. But still had to go to court for attacking my sister. She ended up getting off with just a fine. She was also kicked out of her apartment by the landlord for several reasons. One of them being she tried to solicit herself to him, or so he says. But she denied it ever happened. So she was kicked out after a month or so. But she left a surprise for him. She'd spray painted graffiti on the walls and smeared the bathroom with her own feces. The landlord called me over, and I saw the chaos she'd left. Thankfully it wasn't as bad as I thought it'd be. Just some choice words for the landlord painted on the walls, and the bathroom mostly just had the mirror smeared. So the landlord didn't bother to call police. A cleaning crew had the apartment cleaned and repainted quickly enough. But from there my mother spiraled worse. I heard she tried to pick up younger guys several times. And a friend tipped me off to where she was doing it. I found her in a bar across town. She was wearing pink hot pants a few sizes too small and tried to pick up a guy half her age. And she started calling him a vain little prick for not being interested in her. She was trying to claim to be 29 years old. But no one believed her. Then she saw me. She looked furious the second she realized I was there and started her howling back up as she stomped out. I ended up having to explain to a few people there that she was my mother, and she's nuts. The bar manager told me he'd put her on the ban list because she was trouble every time she came in. The spiral went deeper. I really don't know what my mother was doing for a living, or even where she was living, as she'd gotten fired from her job and had no apartment. By this point my sister was happily off to college. And people stopped seeing my mother around town. That is until she was found dead in a motel room. She'd overdosed from substances and died in late October. I was next of kin, so I was notified of some details. She'd heavily overdosed and also had a lot of alcohol and junk food in the motel room that she was binging on. So police were pretty sure she intended to die this way. When I saw her after she'd passed, she'd lost a fair bit of weight, and looked like she'd aged 10 years in just a few months. It turned out she was suffering from an untreated intimate disease, and had likely been abusing substances for years. She'd pretty much destroyed her body from the inside out. In her final couple of years of life, she was the worst mother she'd ever been. Maybe from a mental condition, or from her substance use. We don't know. We'll never know now. The funeral for my mother was little more than a very small gathering with an urn. And we spread the ashes at sea. There were no tears shed by either me or my sister, or even many words spoken. We ended up going out for ice cream and just having a talk before she had to drive back to where she currently lives because she had class in the morning. I think it can be best described that we weren't happy Mom had passed, but not sad about it either. If anything, I'm not really sure how to mentally process it other than the fact that it's just over and to move on. Currently we have plans to meet at my sister's friend's parents' house for Christmas. My sister and I have no close relatives nearby. And since we were raised so far away from them, they're fairly indifferent to us. Always have been. My sister and I don't even have the same father. We don't even know who our fathers were. Mom never told us. She'd just say we didn't need to know because they didn't want to know us. So there's no point in seeking out a parent that didn't want you. But we're working hard to move forward in life. I've recently begun dating a nice girl I met while having a morning coffee. And we've been together for about 3 weeks now. Without my mom in my life, drama has been minimalized. And I'm rather thankful of that. Hopefully I'll never have to make a post on this site again. My perfect girlfriend cheated and abandoned me after she gave birth. 10 years later she wants us to get back together and be a happy family. 16 years ago I met an amazing, intelligent, beautiful girl named Lucy. Our relationship started off as mutual friends, but the more time we spent together, the more it became apparent that we had feelings for each other. We would always flirt and our hangouts could be classified as dates. So when we started dating, I felt like the luckiest guy ever. After a year into our relationship, we had a baby. I was living the dream, I had a perfect girlfriend, we were raising our daughter together, and we were a happy family. My love for Lucy only grew. I thought she was so brave and strong for giving birth despite all the complications she had. Her pregnancy was very high risk, and the way she behaved with our daughter reassured me that this was the girl I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. So after some years, I proposed and she was so happy. I remember her jumping up and down with joy, showing the ring off to everybody, talking about it nonstop for weeks. Our daughter was even going to be our flower girl. Everything was just right in the world. But things were too good to be true. My relationship with Lucy ended on a random Tuesday night when I got off work. There was a man outside the lobby of the building and he stopped me the second I walked out. He said he wanted to talk to me and I told him I didn't want anything he was selling. He seemed so suspicious, that's just where my mind went. But then he mentioned Lucy. He asked for some of my time so we talked in my office. There, he begged me to call off the wedding and break up with Lucy, permanently, because he and Lucy wanted to be together. I thought this was a prank and I stupidly laughed. I just didn't believe it, until he mentioned details about Lucy that she would never tell a random stranger, such as her terrible home life, her depression, and rough upbringing. Even Lucy wouldn't go that far to expose herself like that for a prank. It took a long time for her to confide in me with those things. He told me to do what was best and give up on Lucy. I returned home as fast as I could and I told Lucy all about it, hoping this was a mistake, but they weren't. In just 2 hours, my life crumbled and my picture-perfect family was destroyed. Lucy had been cheating on me for 2 years. She told me about how all the time she said she loved me, that she wanted us to be together and she loved our family, were all lies. How her new man was younger, stronger, handsome and a better lover. She blamed me for losing her freedom when she became a mom, said she didn't want to be tied to me, and she also didn't want to be my wife. She just wanted her life back. The final stab was when she said she was happy that I finally knew, and now she was able to leave. As pathetic as it sounds, I cried, begged, and humiliated myself. I got down on my knees and asked for another chance to try to fix our relationship and how I could be better. But she didn't want me or this life anymore. She wanted the thrill and excitement that this new guy made her feel. I never saw her again after that. I was heartbroken and felt so useless. I hated myself for being so stupid and not noticing she was cheating on me. I was looking at this relationship through rose-tinted glasses that I missed all the red flags. Even now, I couldn't tell you how I didn't know she was cheating on me. Even though she left me scarred, I had to be strong because my daughter needed me. She believed it was her fault her mom left because she had heard Lucy say she didn't want to be a mom anymore. She was as hurt as I was. Fortunately, my family and Lucy supported us in any way possible. Her parents were so ashamed of their daughter's actions that they thought this was a good way to repay us for the emotional damage she caused. They couldn't even look me in the face without apologizing profusely for what she did. 10 years later, we all moved on from Lucy. With lots of time and therapy, my daughter and I were living happily. Our wounds were healed and we had a very good life. Until Lucy showed up in front of our apartment, waiting for us, wanting to talk. I would like to say that I did something cool, like ignoring her, asking her to leave, or at least being hostile with her. But I'm an idiot and my heart skipped a beat the moment I saw her. She still was beautiful as before, but somehow, she looked even better. Maybe the age made her look mature and elegant, maybe it was the dress, or the makeup. I don't know, but let her in while our daughter gave us some space and went to her room. Lucy told me everything she did once she left us. She lived with that guy from 10 years ago and she enjoyed it. She had so much fun and believed those were the best years of her life, until she noticed that the excitement of that new relationship was fading slowly. At some point, she cheated on that guy too. According to her, she wanted to feel alive and excited. Eventually, that relationship ended, and she started dating other guys. Every relationship became shorter than the previous one, until she only had casual hookups. She mentioned that sometimes, she thought about us, our family, but she was too proud to admit she made a mistake, until last year. My perfect girlfriend cheated and abandoned me after she gave birth. 10 years later she wants us to get back together and be a happy family. Lucy was my old girlfriend, the light of my life, but she cheated on me and pursued a more exciting life. She disappeared without a trace for 10 years. But recently, she came back into our lives. She was waiting in front of my apartment. When we talked, she said she thought about us and was too proud to admit she made a mistake, until last year. She got really sick and was practically on her deathbed. That's when she realized how alone she was, how stupid she was, and the mistake she made so long ago. After much thinking, she regretted everything she did and said. Now she was ready to marry me and be the family we always meant to be. Everything was too much for me to handle, so when she was done, I asked her to leave because I needed some time to think. She accepted, saying she would be back the next day. For years I dreamed about her coming back, and now it was happening. But it just felt wrong. Since then, she visited almost daily, wanting to talk about the best years of our relationship, and how we could be a happy family again. She was trying really hard to convince me to try again, but I was still unsure. So, I went to my friends and family for advice. Most of them said I would be making the worst mistake of my life if I took her back. Others said that I could give her a chance. It took me a lot to heal, and some more time to start making new relationships, so I would be risking everything by continuing a relationship with Lucy. I also needed my daughter's standpoint on this, so we had a deep conversation about it. She said something to me that made me rethink everything. She asked,
"Can you really love someone that hurt us so much?"
and that was everything I needed. I would never forgive myself if I let her hurt my daughter again, and I said that to Lucy. I said she is allowed to have a relationship with my daughter if my daughter wants it, and she can be around whenever she wants, but I was firm on us not getting back together. She can be a mom, not a wife. Lucy only said that she would make me fall in love with her again, and that she would not give up. She asked to meet up to talk, and I decided to go in order to set some boundaries. I told her I wanted her to be honest, and the moment I caught a lie, I was leaving and she will never see me or my daughter ever again. I asked if she was really sorry, or are we her last option? Did she really love us, or are we just a consolation prize? Did she come back for love, or because she was unable to find another man again? She was unable to answer any of that. She only said things like, "It's not like that, you need to understand me, I'm not like this anymore." She kept insisting on giving her another chance, that we can love each other again, that we could be together. She never even mentioned our daughter in any moment, only after I pointed it out, she started to mention her. That made it clear where her priorities were. She didn't care about being a family, she just wanted the reassurance of a relationship. She probably remembered how much I begged her not to leave me and thought I was still that same pathetic guy. But I didn't care for her anymore, and when I tried to settle that we were over, she grabbed my hand. She tried to seduce me, pulling down her blouse, showing me her cleavage, and saying we can find a room so I can do whatever I wanted with her, that she wouldn't say no to anything, to compensate me. I was so disgusted with who she had become. She wasn't the amazing girl I had fallen in love with, and she certainly wasn't the mother of my daughter. Nothing she could say would persuade me, so I told her to let me go, and there we were over. Neither I nor my daughter wanted anything with her, so please, leave us alone, we were living a good life without her. She wouldn't accept that though. She got mad and yelled that I leave, that it wasn't my choice, and she doesn't have anything else. The thing that really triggered me was her saying I couldn't take away her daughter. I yelled back, "Your daughter? Your daughter? You are not her mother. You only gave birth to her, but you are not her mother. Tell me, where were you when she was sick? When she cried because she missed her mom? Where were you on her first day of school? When her heart broke for the second time? Because the first one who broke her heart was her mother. Which PP were you riding when she needed a mom? You have no right to claim you are her mother, because you never acted like that." She tried to reply, but I saw how she was unable to find the words, so I just left. She sent me some texts later, asking for another meeting, another chance, that she loves me and she can change, but I'm done. She doesn't love me or our daughter at all, she only loves herself. I need to work on myself, be stronger, and get over those feelings for her, because they're not real. They're just a memory of what I thought she was. I pretended to be British as a joke, now it's been 15 years. This happened in high school at a summer band camp. I did not know anyone at this camp and I flew in from out of state. When I left the airport, my best friend called me and we were talking. I had an inside joke with my best friend where we would just talk to each other in random accents for no reason. This time I was talking to her in a British accent. Little did I know that a group of people from my summer camp were standing right next to me waiting for the camp's bus to pick us up. I get off the phone and one of them asks if I'm here for the camp too, and I say yes. He then asks me where I'm from and tells me that my accent is so cute. I had really bad social anxiety in high school, and in my anxious mind I thought this dude would think I'm weird for faking an accent. He was also cute, which made me more nervous. I totally panicked and just said, "England." Then he asked me what part and I said, "London." Then, thinking he'd ask if I flew in from abroad, I said I was raised in London and then moved to the US. That was where the lies started, but not where they ended. The entire bus ride to the camp this guy was talking to me about British TV shows like Doctor Who, and I kept faking the accent. So we get to the camp and by now I'm thinking I have to come clean and say it was just a bad joke, but for some reason my anxiety is going, "No, don't do that, it's too late, you are British now." Everyone in the bus had heard my accent and me talking about how much I love Doctor Who in the London theatre. So for the entire 2 months of this camp I pretended to be British. I even watched YouTube videos on how to fake a better accent and words to say to sound more British. That guy and I became friends and we kept in touch. I never came clean. It's been 12 years. For a while we kept in touch a lot and would FaceTime and I'd fake the accent. We aren't as close anymore, but we still talk over Snapchat sometimes, and whenever I send him a Snapchat when I'm talking I have to fake the accent. At this point I think I'm stuck being British forever to him. He can never meet my other friends or family. He lives in a different state, but if he ever visits where I live I guess I'm faking the accent. I wish I had never faked the accent. How far have you gone to help someone, only to get screwed over in the end? I live in China and I had an 18-year-old Australian roommate who we will call Child, due to his lack of adult qualities, and an absolutely fantastic dog who will be referred to as Doggo. I got a Doggo as a puppy and he was a perfect dog. He actually helped me find the woman I married, so you can safely say I was attached to him. Throughout my ownership of Doggo in China, Child was living with me until he got fired from his job for going completely AWOL, and even before that his work performance was a 2/10 at best. He was a bit of a failure at every aspect of life, and for some reason I couldn't help but feel sorry for him. Sometimes I would give him food when I would cook as he couldn't even boil an egg. I taught him how and he ate only eggs for a week, and I would end up doing all the cleaning in the apartment as he couldn't and wouldn't do it himself. Throughout the entire time we were staying together, any kindness or generosity was completely coming from my side and was never returned from him. The only thing he ever did was play and walk Doggo. Once he had lost his job, he had nowhere else in the city to stay, so he kept coming back and staying in my old room. I moved into his old room the moment he left, as he got the nicer room when we moved in. I had essentially ignored his existence while in the apartment, as my girlfriend had moved into my room and I had no reason to ever really interact with him except to try and get him to leave. I wasn't putting much effort into that anyway, as he was keeping Dog occupied while I was spending time with the girlfriend. Eventually Child flies home to Australia, he steals some of my stuff and gives it to a guy he barely knows, is there for a few weeks, and his parents kick him out for not doing anything with his life. He returned to China to go to a low-end university in the south on a complete full scholarship, because he was their only white student, and got back in contact with me. I was living in the north, so we were 1,000s of kilometers apart. He would constantly be sending me messages about Doggo, saying how much he missed him and how much he loved that dog. I cannot exaggerate how often and serious these messages were. He actually tried to call Doggo intoxicated one Friday night. This went on for a couple months until I had issues with my employer, who had been subletting the room I was staying in, and I had 4 days to leave the apartment. When I was moving, I didn't have the capacity to take Doggo with me, so I offered to fly him down to Child, as I knew he had always taken good care of him in the past. Child accepted immediately and was so excited to see Doggo. I paid a lot of money, and a few days later, he was with Child in the South. I should point out that the South is where China gets its reputation for eating dogs, so I made sure to warn Child not to let Doggo out on his own and keep a close eye on him. I had heard a lot of stories about dogs being stolen for food, and he was living in a very low-tier city. I had kept in contact with him for a couple of months, then all went quiet. He wouldn't respond to my messages or calls, so I couldn't get an update about Doggo. About a month went by and I got my girlfriend, who was Chinese, to contact his university to see what the story was. To my complete horror, one of his lecturers told my GF that Child had decided to give up on university and fly back to Australia. He just dumped Doggo on the street. The lecturer actually said she had seen Doggo hanging around campus as a stray, so my girlfriend immediately told her that if she saw him again to grab him and that I will pay to have him sent home. She did see him again. It was the moment the bus hit him. Child wouldn't respond to anything I ever sent him until 2 days after I was married. He actually sent me a message congratulating me, and when I responded, he tried to end the conversation very quickly. I asked him if he was going off to slaughter more dogs, then told him how he had slaughtered Doggo. I got a sorry, crap happens, and an explanation that he had lost his wallet, so he thought he should drop out of school and leave the county. He then proceeded to accuse me of stealing his computer keyboard, then never contacted me again. Sometimes I'll be happily walking along the street and see a dog which will remind me of what happened to my Doggo. I would love to get revenge, but there is literally no way I can do anything since he lives in another country now and I have no way to contact him. I miss Doggo. What was the most clever thing you said to someone walking away? I lived in an apartment building. The upstairs neighbor seemed to think he was back in the dorm. Parties all night, every night. People tromping around. Music blasting with the bass turned all the way up. I tried a white noise app. I got earplugs. I tried playing music next to the bed. My work was suffering. Then I addressed him directly. I would go upstairs and politely ask him to please be a little quieter. No dice. I moved through the let my frustration show stage. The angry stage. The I'll call the authorities stage. When I couldn't take the experiment in sleep deprivation any longer, I contacted our local city council to find out my options. Turns out there are regulations having to do with health. Exceptionally loud noise is on a list of stressors. They sent him a warning letter, saying if there were more complaints they might go so far as to serve eviction. The following weekend a man turned up at my door. He was well dressed, polite, an older gent. He said he was upstairs neighbor's father and could he talk to me? Well, hey, I like to think I'm a reasonable person. Sure, come on in. He pulled out the letter the health department had sent the UN and started waving it about, accusing me of intolerance, trying to cause problems for his son, on and on. He told me I should move out. Nothing wrong with people having company and enjoying music. I've been in his apartment and the music is never loud. As if the kid would give the old man full blast and prove I had cause for complaint. I was taken aback, as much as anything, because it never occurred to me that a 30-year-old would have to send daddums to confront a neighbor. Father wanted me to withdraw the complaint. I refused. He ranted some more, then got up to leave, crabbing the whole way about how do you have the nerve and so on. I saw him at the door, and as he stepped into the hallway he turned and said bitterly, I am so disappointed. I understand, sir. If I had children who behaved as your son has, I'd be disappointed too. He was at a loss for words. It was so gratifying.
Curious, people who used to do burglary for a living, what's the scariest thing you've seen in someone's house? Not really burglary, but unlawful entry simply because I could. Decided to try my luck on an older house, after I noticed they went on vacation. There was a room hidden behind furniture that I managed to get to, but not into, because the door wouldn't open fully without completely moving the furniture. The smell inside was unholy. Like death and bleach. Sent an anonymous tip to the police. Turned out, they basically were luring people's pets in, and doing horrible things, while they were alive. I saw pictures of people around the neighborhood, even myself. I was rattled to the core. I stopped that night, but I still kind of watch my back whenever I see that guy in town. I feel like he knows exactly what I know.
I learned a terrifying secret about my neighbor. It all started with a simple and slow knock on my wall. I brushed it off at first, but at times, it would come back in random intervals and it started to get annoying. Sometimes it was 2 knocks, other times, 3 or 4. The longest succession I heard was 6, but just as quickly as it came, it would leave once it had finished. Now I'm sure this would annoy anybody, but to me, this infuriated me to no end. At the time, I lived in a decent apartment complex in the city that charged an arm and a leg for rent. Even though I could easily afford the rent, I wanted to get my money's worth. So when the knocking started, I easily became annoyed. At first, I thought it wasn't worth the effort for a confrontation, so I endured it. But it just persisted on and on. After about a week, I started to knock back, loudly. It would knock and I'd knock back. I even knocked when it was silent, just to try to annoy whoever was on the other side, and sometimes I would knock furiously and in annoying patterns. This never made the problem go away or change whatsoever. It came and went exactly how it always had and even happened in the middle of the night. After 2 weeks, I decided I was going to take action myself. So one day, I waited patiently for the knocking to start. Once it did, I calmly gathered my wits along with my shoes and exited the door. I strutted to their door with a clear purpose and full of angered annoyance. I picked my fist up and held it for a second, hesitating, and then caught my breath as I proceeded to knock aggressively. "Hey jerk. You can quit anytime now. You'd better quit before I make a complaint on you," I said with the most Karen voice I could muster. I wasn't normally this type of person, but this had to be dealt with. No reply. "Oh, so what? You can knock all hours of the night but you can't answer your own door? Fine. I'm going back now, but if I hear it one more time, I'm going to report it." Still nothing. Feeling a mix of satisfaction and annoyance for having got my point out in such a fashion but not receiving a reply, I walked back to my place. Surprisingly, for the next few days, the knocking ceased, but eventually, it came back just the same as it had left. Damn it. All right. That's it, I said as I got my shoes on and headed downstairs to the main lobby. I arrived and came to the man behind the glass pane, standing in front of multiple rows of keys and some office supplies lying about his workspace. "How can I help you, sir?" he said politely with wide eyes and a big smile. "I need to make a complaint," I said, trying to sound stern but polite. "Oh no, whatever for?" "My neighbor in room 506 has been making some sort of knocking noise against the wall and it's driving me crazy. Can we please do something about it?" The man's eyes and skin became pale and his lip quivered a bit. "I'm sorry sir, what room did you say your neighbor was in?" 506. "Are you absolutely sure?" "Was it Mabe?" "Yes, I'm sure," I said, cutting him off. "Why? Is something the matter?" "No sir, it's just. There's nobody in that room." "Oh, I'm sure you're Ro. I'm sorry sir, I cannot help you. I have to attend to something else at the moment." "Goodbye," the man said frantically as he fumbled with his keys and walked into the door behind the desk. Bewildered at the conversation, I headed back to my floor. As I was stepping out of the elevator, I noticed one of the janitors, cleaning the floors with a carpet cleaning machine. "Excuse me, sir," I said politely, "do you know who might be staying in that one there?" I said as I pointed to 506. "We really aren't supposed to talk about it," he said, ducking his head. "What do you mean?" "Well, okay, I'll tell you, but you can't say anything to anybody, okay? I could lose my job for this," he said in a whisper, putting his hand to his mouth. I nodded my head in agreement. "A couple of years ago, a man hung himself from the rafters. In there. The manager found the body hanging from the metal beam swaying back and forth. Apparently, his neighbor went down to the lobby and complained of somebody in the next apartment over, knocking on the walls. What's an insane coincidence that's impossible to make up? Several years ago I took my wife to see the house I lived in as a child in Idaho. We were the first owners and moved in when I was about 1960 when I was 4 yo. I marveled that the cedar fence my father, older brother and I had built to keep the dogs in was still standing and in decent shape. I pointed out to my wife one of the trees that we had planted in the concrete slab that had a shed on it still had my hand print in the concrete. It was built as the floor of a dog kennel. While we were talking from the sidewalk the current owner came out to find out what we were doing. A little alter his wife joined us. We talked a while. He mentioned that there was a wine cellar below the basement. It was originally built by us during the Cuban Missile Crisis. A few minutes later he asked where we currently lived and I told him a small town outside of Columbus, Ohio. His wife laughed and mentioned that they were from a small town outside of Columbus. It was the same town where we now live. They asked if we perchance knew his brother and my wife recognized the name as the guy that we bought an old double-wide trailer from for her uncle, the trailer he had grown up in. We had never met yet. Somehow he owns the home that I grew up in and I own the home he grew up in small towns about 1,800 miles and 40 to 60 years apart. What's the most denial you've ever seen someone in? This may be more of delusion than denial, but this former co-worker of mine, he thought he was the best at everything in both work and life, when in fact, he was dangerously inept. He would make code changes without validating they worked, then strut around like he just won something while servers crashed. He applied many times for the senior position on my team before accepting the analyst spot. I was hired in the senior position and he never liked me, which is fine. I hated him. I once heard him tell a coworker of his getting passed over for that position and saying, "Well, Michael Jordan was drafted second." He informed anyone who listened that he was captain of both his high school's basketball and football teams and I quote, "because I was so scrappy." He was around 5'6" and had a gut like a pregnant woman. He also said he quit baseball because it was too easy, that he was hitting off of a pitching machine throwing 100 miles per hour when he was 12. He finally quit after he was passed over for promotion again. One of the hardest working people on the team got it, and because she was Indian and a woman, he claimed he was being discriminated against, completely in denial that he was awful at his job. My aunt hit my mother so I dragged her across the floor and punched her till she passed out. My aunt is a poisonous woman. Our whole family doesn't talk to her. She's done things in the past you wouldn't believe. So she left our lives years ago. Recently she returned out of the blue at my mom's house. My mom has 2 other sisters and a brother. My mom and aunt never got on. My mom is a lovely person but she could sense from a young age something was off about her sister, so she kept her distance. My aunt was nasty and would hurt people's feelings intentionally for no reason. She never had a partner or kids. She isolated herself from everyone. My gran cut her off when she tried to steal thousands of dollars from her. We all genuinely think there's something physiologically wrong with her. So back to where I was going with this. One morning I was at my mom's house, just chilling out and there was a knock at the door. So I opened it and there she was. She walked in, She looked like she had taken substances. She looked dead behind the eyes. I tried to stop her but she pushed me down. I honestly don't know why she came to my mom's house out of everyone. I quickly got up and she went into the kitchen. She startled my mom and punched her in the face. My mom didn't even have a chance to blink before she hit her. She went down like a ton of bricks. My heart felt like it had been sucked through into my stomach when I saw it. Something came over me. I don't know if it was anger or adrenaline, but I ran up behind her and grabbed her hair and I dragged her out onto the back lawn and I bashed her face about 15 times. Blood was everywhere. Thankfully no one saw me or I might not have been writing this right now. I got up and I left her there. I went to check on my mom. She was in a lot of pain. I looked back out the window and she was gone. We told our family immediately about this and they were perplexed and angry as to why she just turned up and attacked my mom. I'm still so hurt and angry as I write this, but I also feel tremendously guilty and upset that I did that to her because I've never fought anyone and I'm not a fighter at all, but something came over me and I snapped. I can't get over it for some reason. It just seems so unreal and there was no reason for the attack. God forbid she had a weapon. That's truly scary to think about. We didn't call the police, as I assaulted her badly and didn't want it to bounce back on me. That's another thing I feel ashamed about. But should I feel bad or not? I need others' opinions as I've been bottling this up for a while. My gran was devastated. She just wanted her daughter back, but from a young age she took to substances, spent time in prison and a number of other things. You can't help someone who doesn't want to be saved. What is one situation in which you felt completely helpless? I was admitted to a psychiatric hospital against my will. I went to see a new psychiatrist because I had fallen back into depression and thought I could benefit from medication. I told the doctor I was having thoughts of taking my life and she told me she was putting me on an involuntary 3-day hold. I told her I didn't think it was a good idea for me. I had a strong support system, and was not in dire need of help. I just needed medication to give me a little push in the right direction. Brought my girlfriend in to talk to the doctor. She was ignored. I called my dad and asked him what I should do. The response: looks like you're going to be locked up for a while. This is why you don't tell people these things. After that, a security guard escorted me to the ER. They took all my things and put me in a hospital gown. There were no rooms, so I was put on a gurney in a hallway. Girlfriend snuck in. She'd been waiting for 4 hours. I told her to just go home and it'd be okay. It wasn't. Was in the ER hallway for another 12 hours. Too stressed to eat, drink or sleep. Finally at 6 a.m. the next morning my EMTs came to take me to a psychiatric hospital 3 hours away. On the ride there they asked me the name of the second doctor who confirmed my hold. Told them I didn't see a second doctor. They told me that shouldn't have happened. They sympathized with me and saw I wasn't crazy or anything, so they gave me my phone back for the ride there. Messaged my parents and teachers. Got to the hospital and the ward I should have been to was full. So I went to the ward for severe cognitive dysfunction. It was like a horror movie where the protagonist is trying to tell people he's sane but nobody listens. The main doctor in charge of the place comes and sees me. He sees that I'm crying and says I'm clearly depressed, so he was going to go ahead and keep me for observation. An hour later I was finally moved to the ward for the cognitive people, aka the ward for all the people who tried to take their life. They were all very kind. They sort of taught me the ropes on what I should do to get out on time. The biggest problem I had was the food. Really awful, no salt, passed right through me. Diarrhea every time I came back from a meal. I ended up losing 10 pounds by the time I got home.
My brother-in-law sabotaged my marriage because I rejected him in college, and I just discovered his years-long plan that made my husband leave me. I, 38 female, met my brother-in-law, 38 male, at university. He asked me out in our first year and I refused. He called me the C word and told me that I'm shallow. My best friend told me that it was harmless comments from a drunken guy who got rejected. I never thought of myself shallow. It was his demeanor and awkwardness that was off-putting to me. Anyway, he proved my friend right, and other than these comments I have never felt uncomfortable during my uni years because he never bothered me again. Not even looked my way. The next time I met him was when my baby sister, 28 female, introduced him as her boyfriend. I didn't even recognize him at first because it was like 9 or 10 years since that day he talked to me. He was visibly annoyed that I didn't recognize him and called me a liar. The family was skeptical at first about him, but he seemed to treat my sister right and she seemed happy. He is very rich, taking her all over the world, and he seemed kind with us too. They got married after a year of dating. They have 3 children. I met my now ex, 40 male, 5 years ago, and the only odd comment from my brother-in-law was that I was still as shallow and superficial as I was in uni. At the time, I took it as a joke, but in hindsight, when I found out the truth and started thinking back looking for red flags, this was probably a big one. He never showed any signs that he disliked my husband, and he was always decent enough, and his indifference to have a close friendship with my husband, and I didn't seem odd because he was always a recluse. A year ago, my husband came home and accused me of cheating and said he had evidence. The guy contacted him and he had exposed pictures etc. of me on his phone. The guy told my husband that he didn't know at first that I was married, but as soon as he found out he contacted my now ex. He even apologized to my husband. I have never met this guy in my life. Nothing I said or did made my husband believe me. He left me and our divorce is pending. Then yesterday that guy contacted me. He apologized for what he did and told me that he is friends with my brother-in-law. He sent me conversations, endless conversations that my brother-in-law had about me for years. He has never forgotten that I, in his words, didn't even give him a chance and only judged him by his looks. He called me C in that chat. Both group chats with his friends, but mostly with this guy. They planned this attack and my brother-in-law somehow got access to my photos. The reason this guy contacted me now is that he felt guilty because even when my marriage is over, my brother-in-law still was angry and hateful, especially when he heard that I was on a date last weekend. So the friend felt that he didn't help his friend but ruined innocent people's lives. I'm not sure what to do. My brother-in-law has actually been happier and more sociable than usual since my divorce, and now I know why, although at first I thought he felt sorry and wanted to support me. His jokes about me ending up an old maid with cats as companions don't sound like jokes anymore. He meant them. I don't want to ruin my sister's life. She's very happy with her husband. I'm not sure either if I can with her husband. I'm not sure if I should tell my ex or not. I am very heartbroken that he didn't believe me. I love him very much and he is the love of my life, but I'm not sure if I can forgive him for not believing me. But he is a victim in this too, so maybe he needs to know for closure. I am so terribly sad and hurt. I'm sorry this post got very long. Update 2 months later, I don't know where to start. I have been in constant pain and stress about everything that happened, but my brother-in-law is now exposed to everyone about what he did to me. For those of you who think he is in love with me, he isn't. He very much hates my guts and has since the day I rejected him. Hate is also a driving force and not only love. So for the stupid users, that I would like to call losers, who made fun of me about me, bragging about a man not being over me in 20 years, that's just not it. If this is bragging, then you're actually very sick in the head. I was in constant fear that my brother-in-law will be hurting my sister because of me, and I am not certain if he will. But that was the only reason I have been apathetic. I wasn't sure what the right step was with people like him. He has hidden his hatred so well for so long, so what more is he capable of? I didn't want my sister and her children to be the collateral damage. That's why I have been careful. I am sorry to disappoint you by not being the strong badass. I have other priorities. My sister and I finally talked. I love her and her children very much. She seemed just very hurt and questioning her entire marriage, and who can blame her? I tried the baby steps approach. I wanted her to know I was there for her, and I was honest with her about my worries about her and her children with a man like him. It worked for a while and I was being hopeful, but something changed, and it probably had to do with her husband giving her an ultimatum. Divorce or cut your family off. She chose her marriage. It broke my parents and me, but I don't think we can do anything about it. It is her own choice even if we believe it is coerced. But maybe there's this little chance that she knows him better than we do. There's a little hope that he is a better person towards his family. I'm clinging on to that hope. She wrote us telling us to forget she and her children existed and that they will take legal action if we ever try to contact them. Brother-in-law deleted all his social media accounts and his friends apparently all want nothing to do with him. I have heard he is planning on leaving the city because everyone knows what he did now and he is having a hard time with it. He barely leaves the house and he has been shamed, even at work. My ex-husband and I are moving on with the divorce. I don't blame him for believing the rumors, but at the same time I wish he knew me better like I thought he did. That I would never do such a thing and cheat on him. I'm so sorry that he moved back for me and probably was hoping we could give it another chance, but I can't. He has apologized so many times and said so many times that he never truly believed the rumors, but I have started to think that our marriage wasn't strong enough to overcome a rumor. It is nobody's fault, but I thought our love was stronger than it actually was. I think we both thought that. I have started dating a new guy a few weeks before all this started, after over a year of me not even being able to leave my bed. He has seen all of this unfolding and he's been very patient and supportive. I think I have a real shot at happiness now. At least he knows everything and is well prepared in case my brother-in-law isn't done with me yet. Thank you for reading all this. And thank you again for being there for me.
I effed my wife so hard I almost died. My wife loves intimacy now, but it takes her a lot of work to reach a climax. Just to paint a picture, she essentially lays on her stomach while I assume a planking position over her while thrusting. This is the only position that works for her, and she does not like my weight on her during this time. So, I am essentially planking while thrusting for 25 to 30 minutes on average each time we do the deed. I don't know how many fitness people are reading this, but they can attest that planking is the worst thing ever. The silver lining is that my abs are freaking solid now. During one of our sessions we assume her favorite position at the edge of the bed. After about 5 minutes I felt a slight ache in my low back, but I wanted to please her so I didn't stop. Big mistake. During one of the final thrusts, I hear a loud crack in my back and I scream in pain. Next, my hand slips off the side of our elevated bed and lands on the tile floor, smacking the back of my head against the ground. To my dismay, I only had a split second to realize that I accidentally dragged her off the bed with me. Everything seemed to move in slow motion for me as all of her weight landed on my face, smashing my head against the floor again. She is not a large person, but 120 pounds dropping onto someone's face can knock anyone out, and that is what happened. Everything went black. I was in and out for a while after that, so I don't really know what happened, but when I finally came to my senses, I'm literally being wheeled out of my house by emergency medical services. I had gauze shoved up my nose, with a large man smiling from ear to ear standing over me. "Good morning, champ," he said. They rushed me to the hospital. I had a concussion along with a broken nose. Interestingly enough, the doctor told me that I would be surprised by how often people end up in the hospital because of intimacy-related reasons. He said mine was one of the stupidest one though, besides. The guy who got a chopstick stuck in his pee-pee.
My pervy husband came out as a femboy and won't stop talking like a baby in public. I'm sick of him trying to look like a child porn star. My husband started getting into femboy porn around 5 months ago, Although I thought it was a little strange, I didn't think much of it, but then 3 months ago he came out to me as a femboy. He started saying he was embracing his feminine side by wearing thigh highs, a skirt, and acting all shy and doing baby talk and talking like this. I find this a bit dehumanizing that this is what he considers femininity. The biggest problem is, he does this around our 2 children, ages 4 and 6. I told him I don't feel it is very appropriate to act this way around our kids, but he says, in these words, "It's my true self. You're just being judgmental to gender non-conforming people," which is so outdated. He also tells me that it's good to learn from dad that they can be who they want to be. It's become embarrassing, as he does this when we go to family outings, in front of my parents, and my friends. I've become the laughingstock of my family and friends. I don't know how to deal with who my husband has become. I can't even bring my husband into restaurants anymore for dates because he always asks them for the kids' menu, and when they tell him he's too old he throws a temper tantrum. I don't know if something is bothering him and his outlet is dressing up as a femboy and talking like a baby, but I can no longer deal with it and I am really starting to consider divorcing him. I don't have my license because I have epilepsy, so my husband goes to pick the kids up from school every day, and both school faculty and students make fun of my kids for the way their father dresses. I have had parents tell me it is not appropriate to be having your husband pick up your kids from an elementary school in that kind of clothing, which I am aware of, but I live 20 minutes away from the school and I do not want my kids to be walking that long in the winter. I don't want to hurt him as I still love him dearly, and leaving him would hurt me as well, but I can no longer stand my kids getting made fun of or myself. Does anyone have any advice as to what I should do?
My ex replaced his terminally ill daughter with twins. As you can see from the title, I, 33, have a daughter, 10, who is going to pass away sooner than later. It started as cancer, specifically osteosarcoma, but it spread through her body. A week ago she got put on home hospice, which in a way is a good thing. I'd rather her spend time at home than at a hospital, even though her doctors and nurses are wonderful. My ex-husband and I divorced when my daughter was 3. She would visit her dad on weekends. Everything was good for a while. 2 years ago he had twin daughters with his now wife. That was the same time our daughter got diagnosed with cancer. He only visited 4 times while she was at the hospital over the 2 years since the cancer diagnosis. Well, I told him the day I found out that was put on hospice and she's going to be at home and focus on making sure she is comfortable. He didn't say much. Mostly said he is glad she's going to be comfortable. I later texted him saying whenever he feels like seeing her just text/call me. I didn't get a response back. So I called him asking if he plans on seeing his daughter anytime soon. He said he doesn't feel comfortable seeing his daughter in that state. I asked if he was serious. He said well, that and I enjoyed spending my off time with new wife and the twins. I said that is so messed up. You rather spend all your free time with your new family than at least a little time with your daughter who isn't going to be here much longer. I said it's clear you replaced our daughter with the twins since the cancer diagnosis. He didn't say anything. That happened a few hours ago and I've been holding back tears ever since. He replaced her. Having a child with cancer is difficult, especially when it spreads and becomes terminal. But he hasn't even been here to deal with it or to love and support his daughter. She has been wondering when her dad is coming to see her. I have no idea what to say now. My nightmare son accused me of kicking him out for being gay when he stole and crashed my vehicle. I just went with his version of the story and life has been better ever since. Throughout his life my son has had a rebellious streak. From trouble at school, lying to teachers, stealing, bullying, missing classes, you name it, he's done it, everything at some point. We tried therapy sessions but they never came to anything and he wouldn't show up for them. We've been in and out of court for stupid petty theft and other idiotic things he's done. This streak also continued at home, though at his mother's he always manipulated her and presented himself as a victim, so she and I would butt heads from time to time as he often blamed me. I thought one time that what I was doing as a father wasn't enough, that's why he's being like this. So I tried to do things with him all his life, put him into extracurriculars, spend time with him, and be interested in his hobbies, but no matter what I've tried he's always lashed out and pushed back on me. I've gone to therapy myself and nothing worked. He was always ungrateful to anything I did. He wanted to join a dance class. I got him enrolled in a class I could afford on my salary. He would then tell me I was abusive because I wouldn't put him in the more expensive ones. Did he want to drive? I bought him a car and taught him. But his car was pooped high and embarrassing. The clothes I bought? Same thing. No matter how hard I've ever tried, nothing has been good enough for him. On top of that, he's stolen from me, lied to me on numerous occasions, and spread lies and rumors to his mom, teachers, and friends about my supposed horrible treatment of him. He's 19 years old and blames me for every little thing that ever goes wrong in his life, and his mother always echoes it. Well, 6 months ago it reached a boiling point. He asked me if he could borrow my car to go do something. I told him no because I had to go to the office late to get things ready for the morning. While I was in the shower he stole the keys to my car. He refused to answer my calls all night. In the morning a random vehicle dropped him off and I asked where my car was. He told me to F off. He had obviously been drinking and went to sleep. When he woke up I found out that he had gotten into a wreck with it. Wrote off my car and the other one. On top of the insurance cost, and rise in insurance after the collision, I also had to pay a towing fee for my now destroyed car. We got into a huge argument where he let me know everything he thought about me and what a horrible piece of poop dad I am. It ended with me kicking him out and him going to stay with his mother. After 2 days of radio silence, I get a nasty text from his mom. Apparently what he told her what happened is that he came out to me and that I blew up and kicked him out for being gay. I was pissed. Not because he was gay, that much had been obvious since he hit puberty, if not even earlier, even though he never brought it up to me. Just the sheer victim lying bullshit he had done his entire life hit me. I didn't reply for a day after a steady stream of more abusive messages and his mom calling me a monster and abusive. She informed me that she called my work and let them know what a homophobe I am. Something in me in that last one just made my last bit of empathy snap. For the record, I am not homophobic, having even had a gay experience myself in high school, but something in me just snapped. I wrote back confirming what he said to her as true and how I couldn't morally accept him back into my house and that I was essentially disowning him, how his being gay just wasn't something I could overcome. I was just sick of defending myself from his relentless bullshit and it felt freeing. My text got put online by both him and my ex-wife and spread like wildfire on my social media, and I've lost some friends and family, while gaining others' secret support. It was rough for a bit, but even with that public crucifixion, I feel happy, like I can breathe again. He sent me messages saying that he wanted to come back to my house or that he needed money. I think it kind of backfired now that my ex thinks that he is gay and has been posting a lot about it on social media. He tried calling me, but I just reiterated what I said to his mother, that I disagreed with his new lifestyle, and I figured it could be another thing he could be a victim about, and he could stay angry at me but just stay out of my life for good. After a while, he just stopped trying. My boss pulled me aside to talk to me and he congratulated me on taking a stand against degeneracy and that my job wasn't in jeopardy. After that, he's been really nice to me, even giving me a better position in the company with a pay raise. I plan to use my new position to negotiate a good salary at a new company. I'm not going to stay working for someone with these crappy values. All in all, things couldn't have worked out better for me. I will remain a closeted LGBT supporter, and my son can stay the hell away from me and spread his narrative of how I kicked him out for being gay. I'm a pastor who doesn't believe in God. Here I sit on another Sunday morning, rethinking my divisions and why I am here. I love the people I minister to. I believe that there are some really good principles in the Bible, and of course some really awful ones. So I feel okay about the message of love and hope that I get to deliver it. I push back against the hate and homophobia and judgmental nature of so much contemporary American Christianity. But I don't believe the underlying myth, and I have to pretend that I do. I never believed in them full-heartedly, even though I grew up in the church. My whole family is in ministry, my father is also a pastor, and my mom has been leading the choir for years. I work outside the church and do my ministry work on a voluntary basis. I'm not economically dependent on ministry work. I used to get a small stipend but gave it up a few years ago when I no longer needed it. But even though I am a volunteer, I am actually a preacher. I have to lead worship, give sermons, and lead Bible classes in Sunday schools. Sermons are the easiest but also the hardest. It's easy because I can pick out passages I agree with, the good and positive ones, love, grace, hope, things people like to hear. But it's also hard because that's when most people come to listen to me, some are new believers. And it makes me wonder all the time whether I am lying, or just withholding. I strive only to say what I believe, but it's a stretch. When I say God is love, I really mean love is God, the highest power. Certainly not Christian orthodoxy. I try hard to teach only what I believe, love, grace, care for others. I would hate to hurt those who have trusted me. Overall, I believe I'm doing more good than harm, but there's a dishonesty at the center of it that I have to try to ignore. To everyone, but the greatest of these is love.
How did your high school crush turn out as an adult? He had a roller coaster of a life. I admire him more than ever, and more than most people I know, but can't wrap my head around why I ever found him physically attractive. Maybe it was always just his heart. By age 25, he had a PhD, a wife, and was a captain in the Navy. By 30, he had 2 PhDs, a small business where he made a metric ass ton of money, and his wife was pregnant. By 31 he was diagnosed with stage 4 skin cancer that swiftly spread to his lymph nodes, bones, esophagus, and a few other places. He was told he had minimal chance of making it 5 more years. Even with the best health insurance money can buy, it still basically wiped him out. 7 years later, he's living a comfortable but not extravagant life as a civilian contractor for the Navy, same wife and 2 happy healthy kids, and spends most of his free time advocating for better public health care.
What are some wholesome historical events that actually occurred? Joshua Abraham Norton, Emperor of the United States and Protector of Mexico. He declared himself Emperor of the U.S. because he was tired of how the government was being run. Oh, yes, obviously, he had no real political power, but he stuck to his act. He would write letters to the government all the time, ordering changes, which were never heeded, obviously, but by golly, he didn't give up on it. That's just how it started, though. He lived in San Francisco, and every day he would go on a patrol of the streets in an elaborate blue uniform, aided by 2 stray dogs, Bummer and Lazarus, who followed him everywhere, and with whom the emperor shared his meals, making sure that the streets and cable cars were kept in good repair, checking the uniforms of police officers, and even just giving deep philosophical lectures to anybody who would listen. People loved him, and humored the emperor to no end. Norton even printed his own unofficial money, to pay his own debts, and many of the places he frequented would accept it as currency. When a police officer tried to arrest him and have him committed to a mental institution, the police chief ordered his release and apologized on behalf of the force. Even the 1870 census marked his occupation as emperor. It did also list him as insane, but still, when a bunch of anti-Chinese protesters tried to gang up on some Chinese, the good emperor stood between them and recited the Lord's Prayer until they went away peacefully. He did a lot of things like this. Here's the best part. Norton died in his early 60s. More than 10,000 people attended his funeral. It took days for the funeral to end. I can't help but smile every time I think of the lovable doofus known as Joshua Abraham Norton, Emperor of the United States, and Protector of Mexico. The stranger on my patio scared the F out of me, until I met him again 16 years later. When I was 9, I usually got home from school about an hour before my mom got home from work. I lived 50 meters away from school, so my mom figured I was mature enough to be home alone for around an hour before she got home. One day I got home from school. I did the usual thing, which was to make sure I locked the front door, and double-check that the back door leading to the patio was also locked. I then rushed to my room upstairs to play as much PlayStation as possible before my mom came home and made me do homework. While playing, I heard this noise coming from outside my window. My room was located one floor over the patio, with a view of a road. It was kinda like the sound of a cat. But my cat had been missing for over 3 months. Hope sparked and I thought, oh my god, did he finally come back? I ran downstairs to check if it was my cat, but the sight that met me gives me goosebumps just writing this. There was a guy standing on my patio. A tall guy with black hair covering half of his eyes, making him look like a male version of the Ring women or something. I could hear him making high-pitched sounds, almost like a cat meowing. A brown liquid was running down from his mouth, and I could see him spitting out my dad's stomp cigarettes. He was actually eating from the ashtray. I was frozen observing this, eventually snapped out of it and screamed so loud that the man must have heard it. He didn't react, he kept on eating from the ashtray. I ran upstairs to my room, locked the door and called my mom, who then called the cops. I've never been more terrified in my life. Laying in bed under my sheets, shivering with fear, as I hear these creepy high-pitched noises from the guy eating cigarette stomps from the ashtray on my patio. I kinda blacked out for a moment, because the next thing I remember is the police arriving on the road by my yard. I hear them talking to the guy saying stuff like, "What are you doing? Get over here or we will come down and arrest you," and so on. He didn't respond, but the high-pitched sounds were more frequent and louder. I decided to look through the window, feeling safe now that the cops were there. I could see 2 police officers standing by my fence, one man and a woman. I did not see the creepy man, however, because he was standing directly 1 story under me in my field of view. The police jumped the fence, and I remember hearing the creepy guy screaming louder than anything I've ever heard before. He charged the female police officer with full force, and he king knocked her out cold. The male officer then immediately tased the guy, leaving him shaking on the ground, screaming still. The policeman struggled to keep him on the ground while putting handcuffs on him, but eventually made it. After a while he managed to wake up the female police officer, who seemed to be badly hurt. He called for backup and an ambulance, and then he saw me standing in the window above him. The expression on my face must have been something else, because he just looked at me and said, "I sure as hell hope you didn't see all that." I started to cry. By this time neighbors started to arrive wondering what the hell was going on. One of my neighbors, an elderly woman, made me come down and she took care of me until my mom came back home. The police took the creepy guy with them in the car and left. Before they left they promised to come back and talk to us about what had happened. This is where the story takes an unexpected turn. The male police officer came back later that night and sat down with me and my mom to talk. He explained that the guy on my patio was actually diagnosed with severe autism. He had escaped a facility where mentally challenged people lived, located around 5 kilometers from where I live. He explained that the guy had actually been living in my house 5 years ago, but he had been forced to move when his mom, his only caretaker, died. The poor guy probably thought he would find his mom in my house. He missed the routines and he missed living there with his mom. The police had to move him from the house that time 5 years ago, because he was extremely strong. From what I heard, he had extreme tensions in the body because of the autism, making his muscles grow stronger and stronger throughout the years. This was the reason he reacted the way he did when the police came that day. Still frightened, I told the police officer that he needed to make sure this would never happen again. He promised it wouldn't. After a few sleepless nights my life got back to normal. The years went by and the guy didn't come back. Until 1 year ago. At this time my mom and dad had moved out. I bought the house from them and I'm still living there today. I was enjoying my morning coffee on the patio when I saw this random guy stopping on the road by my fence. He just stands there, looking at me. I look at him and give him a nod. And then I hear the high-pitched noises. Holy poop, it's him. His hair had turned gray, but the high-pitched sounds made me realize. My heart started racing and I instantly remembered the reason why he was back. I realized that he must have managed to escape again. Because I kept my cool a bit longer than when I was 9, I started to realize how sorry I felt for the guy. 16 years later and he was back to look for his mom. I decided to carefully ask him if he wanted to come down to the patio. He instantly jumped the fence. I started to think he would knock me out like he did to that police officer. He didn't. He smiled. He looked at me and smiled. I offered him to sit down. He didn't respond. I offered him to come inside. He started laughing. We went inside. His face lit up, pure joy. He was home. It reminded him of the life he had with his mom. It almost made me tear up. All of a sudden he sat down on my couch, turned on my TV and switched directly to the cartoons. I observed him for a while. He was just completely focused on the cartoons. I just wanted him to enjoy the moment, so I didn't say anything to him. I realized I had to call the facility to let them know. The caretakers arrived 10 minutes later. After a lot of convincing he got back up, crying, and they went back to the facility. I called the facility 2 days later. We made a deal. His name is Tom, and I now consider Tom my friend. Every Sunday from the day he returned, Tom and his caretakers visit me to watch cartoons. They say it's the highlight of his week. It makes my heart warm. For several years my thoughts were let's not meet, guy on my patio eating from the ashtray. Now my thoughts are let's meet every Sunday to watch cartoons, my friend Tom. My daughter's boyfriend doesn't like me touching her. My, 34, stepdaughter, 19, and I are very close. Her boyfriend, 20, doesn't like that. Alright, so let's get the obvious out of the way. Yes, she calls me dad. I've been in her life since she was 11. Yes, the age difference is weird for a lot of people. My wife is 40 and she had a kid, sue me. Lastly, I am in no way attracted to my daughter. She's a pretty girl, but that's my kid. Now we can begin. My daughter and I are very close. She'd never had a decent male figure in her life at the time I met her, and I knew that if I wanted to pursue a relationship with my now wife that I should do everything I could to fill the role, so I did. I helped with homework, I played games with her, watched shows or YouTubers she was into, read her favorite books, etc., because I wanted to build a solid relationship with her. Turns out, if you treat things like they're important sometimes they go well. She and I spend a lot of time together, and our family doesn't really have big touch barriers, so hugs, cheek kisses, sometimes she'll use me as a pillow, etc. All of this is very common, and she does the same with my wife. I love you is said probably 50 plus times a day in my house. We are affectionate, that's the picture I'm trying to paint here. Very recently, she started dating. Her boyfriend doesn't appreciate that we're comfortable with expressing our affection toward each other, even going so far as to ask me to tone it down when he's around, in private. My daughter doesn't know this yet. I want to respect my daughter's new relationship, because this is a new and exciting thing for her and I'm genuinely happy for her, but I also don't want to lose the connection I've spent so long building, and I don't think I should be made to pretend it's less important to me just because she's dating someone that happens to be a little insecure. I can understand where the guy is coming from, but I don't think he really has a right to interject. Here. The dilemma is this: should I tone it down as requested, should I continue on as normal, or should I tell my daughter about the request and let her handle it however she sees fit? Honestly, not sure what the right move is. I spoke with my daughter the next evening after she came home from work. Her boyfriend was at the house at the time. He was over for dinner and had picked her up. I pulled her aside for a couple of minutes and let her know what happened. She was surprised, because she's already had this talk with her boyfriend. She said she'd handle it and left. A little while later, I called them in for dinner. After she finished eating, she confronted him. I'm paraphrasing because she told a story, but this is basically what she said. So my dad told me what you said, and I wanted to wait until after dinner to bring it up. I didn't have a good childhood. My biological father treated my mom horribly, and after she left him he never contacted me again. Her next big relationship was worse. It seemed fine on the outside, but there was a lot of emotional abuse and controlling behavior. I was caught up in it too. Then this guy came along. I was obviously skeptical at first. He looked like trouble to me. He was making my mom happy, but I was an ICB word to him because bad men were all I'd ever known. He asked me questions for over a year trying to get to know me and I shut him out. One day when I was reading, he asked what book it was. I didn't even answer him, I just lifted it up so he could see the cover. It was Island of Shipwrecks in the Unwanted series. He said, that looks pretty cool, what's it about? And for the millionth time I didn't answer. Maybe 2 weeks later, he asked me if I was finished with the book. I said yeah, why? And he said, well, I read the other 5, I thought you might let me borrow it so I can catch up and we can talk about it. I thought he was lying through his teeth, so I asked him questions about plot points and characters. Not a single wrong answer. I went to my room and got the book for him. It's kind of a dumb story, but you have to understand something. My dad is the first man who was ever nice to me and I gave him plenty of reasons not to be. He was patient and thoughtful and never pushed me out of my comfort zone, and I will always be grateful for that. Bottom line is that I love my dad, and the only people who have a say in our relationship is us. If you feel threatened because we're close, that's not going away. Ever. I like you. I have fun with you. But if you think I'll change my relationship with my dad for you, then you've made a mistake. If you're too insecure to handle the fact that I'm close to my dad, this isn't going to work out. If you can handle it, I would love to have you around. Otherwise. He kind of interrupted her here and said, it's not just because you're close. I get that he's been good to you and your mom and that's great, but have you seen the guy? Yes? What about it? It just makes it really weird for me. I don't know how to explain it other than that. You're way closer to your dad than anyone I've ever met and it's a little creepy when you take into account he looks like he could be a what are you doing stepdaughter guy. Look, there's apparently 2 people at this table. For context, it was the 2 of them, my wife, and myself at the table, who think my dad is effable and it's really weird that you're one of them. Choosing time is over, the door is that way. Do not call or text me anymore. So that's pretty much how it went down. After he left, she cried for a few hours in her room. When she finally came out it was around midnight or so, and she sat next to me on the couch. I asked her if she was worried this would be a constant problem, and if she wasn't comfortable with how things are I can understand and respect that. She hugged me very tightly and just replied, don't be dumb. So I guess everything is alright. I also thought it was kind of funny, disrespectful, but funny, that she had this big story planned out. I got some rom-com vibes from it personally, but it was her first boyfriend so she has no experience having big talks, and the guy just completely disregarded it. Obviously empathy and understanding are not his strong points. I feel bad for my daughter because it was her first relationship, but I definitely think she dodged a bullet. Am I the a-hole for calling my son's girlfriend racist and stupid? I have 2 adult children. My daughter has a 5-year-old daughter, and my son's girlfriend is pregnant with their first child. I've always got the impression that she doesn't like me, but that's fine. I'm not the one married to her. I don't particularly like her either, but we are civil for my son's sake. I'm Brazilian. I grew up in Brazil, love my country, and I go back once or twice a year to visit family. I had both of my children over last night, and I mentioned that when it is safe to travel I will be taking my granddaughter to Brazil for the first time. My son's girlfriend said that she doesn't want her child going with me in the future, which is fine, because her hypothetical child was never invited. Then she said she doesn't want her child exposed to that culture at all, and that it would be disgusting and borderline child abuse to raise a child there. I asked what she meant by that, and she said she is worried about her daughter growing up around my culture because I've had multiple plastic surgeries. My daughter got a honker job for a graduation gift, and I'm vain. She was basically trying to call me a SLT without saying it. Brazil does have a reputation for being the plastic surgery capital of the world, but it's not like I'm taking the 5-year-old there to get a consultation. It is also a beautiful country with a culture that goes far beyond plastic surgery. I told her she is incredibly stupid, borderline racist, and she doesn't have to worry about being taken on any trips. My husband said maybe we should take her and get something done about her fat, ugly chin, although I did later tell him that was an a-hole thing to say. My son now wants me to apologize for calling her stupid, but I think that she's the one in the wrong here for defaming my culture. Dentist, when were someone's teeth unoperable? I called my patient butter teeth and he left my office in tears because I told him he should have glowed up by now. As a dentist you stare at a lot of ugly faces. The only thing that can save you is having pearly whites, and you can't just get veneers and call it a day, but actual bone teeth can turn a penny to a 10. This patient I bullied had the worst acne I'd ever seen, an emo haircut straight from 2011 Tumblr, and teeth that made everything look 10 times worse. I audibly gagged in disgust looking at him. No one should have chompers like that. I don't know what vibe I gave off, but when he saw me, he lit up and trauma dumped his entire life story to me. He said he didn't have any friends at school since he looked like a mole rat, but he had a huge crush on the girls' tennis team captain. He said every time he tried talking to somebody at his school, they would call him butter teeth. But when his crush lent him a pencil during class, he decided he couldn't fumble another opportunity like that again. He came in the next day with flowers, a huge confetti shooter, and a box of chocolates to ask her out in the perfect way. But when he tried to ask her out, she looked at his teeth and giggled a little, and he was so distracted by her laughter that he dropped the huge confetti shooter on his busted toe and started crying hysterically. Apparently, everybody pointed and laughed at him, and the girl was embarrassed that he even thought he had a chance with her. He even started tearing up while telling me the story because he'd never felt that low before. He knew he wasn't the best looking, but he didn't realize that the girl he thought would marry him one day couldn't even stand to be near him. So, he came here to see what he could change so that everyone could finally see him differently. I insisted that all he had to do was fix his teeth and he would be set for life. His new smile would make him really confident. He thought I was lying to him, so I told him to look up the missing tooth, missing eyebrow guy. As soon as he saw that image, he was convinced and I started working on his teeth. I asked how they were so stained and yellow, and he said he drank a lot of coffee because he stays up playing Genshin Impact every night. His mouth also smelled awful and it made me gag. I was surprised he wasn't affected by the smell, but he must have gotten used to it by now. I told him his oral hygiene was really bad, so we needed to whiten his teeth and get rid of his bad breath. He asked if I could give him veneers since it was a quick solution, and he didn't want to get made fun of anymore. He said that if better teeth were going to change what little he had left of his teenage years, then he wanted to do it fast. I couldn't give him veneers because that would only cover up the problem, not get rid of it. He wanted to know how he could get white teeth naturally, and my answer to him was that he needed to brush his teeth with toothpastes that don't have harsh chemicals in them because brands like Crest and Colgate, which everybody uses for some reason, have fluoride and hydrated silica. Too much fluoride leads to brown spots in the tooth and weakens it, making it more brittle and easier to chip off. As for hydrated silica, it damages tooth enamel, and using it to brush your teeth is like using sand to clean glass. So, if he thought he was cleaning his teeth every day, he was actually doing more damage and making it far dirtier than before. I told him that just changing to a natural toothpaste with better ingredients would be more effective for him since the standard brands weren't working. Lately, I've only been giving my patients ORL toothpaste because it has xylitol, which reduces the risk of tooth decay by eliminating the bacteria that causes the decay, and avoids all harsh chemicals, including fluoride and hydrated silica. It also has the best taste, which makes it easier for my patients not to go back to their usual sweet toothpaste. But honestly, any toothpaste without harsh chemicals works. You just have to do the research first to make sure it's actually safe for you. My patient tried arguing with me when he saw that toothpaste costs almost $30, even though people spend thousands on clothes, makeup, and useless fitness equipment. But teeth are the only thing you can never take off. When I explained it to him that way, he accepted the ORL toothpaste, and I scheduled him for a 4-week checkup since that would be enough time for the toothpaste to show some results. 4 weeks later, I actually found him talking with the other people in the waiting room. This was something he had never done before, but he seemed really comfortable talking with everyone. The moment he entered my office, he immediately started ranting about his life, and as soon as he started speaking, I could see, and smell, the difference. This past month, his schoolmates had stopped saying bad things about him, and nobody called him butter teeth since his teeth weren't yellow anymore. And because he was far more approachable now that he was more confident with his appearance, he had some friends who invited him out a lot. Most of his nights were spent partying with them or playing video games. Mind you, he hadn't groomed himself at all and still had acne all over his cheeks and a horrible bowl cut. All he did was fix his teeth with the ORL toothpaste and people were all over him. So, I sent him off with one request. Well, everything is fine with you except for that haircut. Please go see a competent barber.
What made you nope out of a friendship? I realized 90% of our conversations were them talking shit about other people and being extremely negative. That energy rubs off on you. Also had a sense this friend wanted me to fail, if that makes sense. Like my celebrations weren't really celebrated, and they got a sick sense of pleasure at me being knocked down a peg. She had a crush on a guy friend of mine, no biggie there. Plenty of my friends have dated each other. We were hanging out one day and I went to change my son's diaper and left my cell on the table next to her. When I come back, she randomly says she's gotta go and leaves. Okay, sure. I grab my phone and it's open to texts between me and that particular guy friend. I didn't have a password at the time. She had scrolled back pretty far too. I called her out on it. She said she just wanted to make sure him and I were really platonic friends and him and I didn't have a thing going on. She could have just asked. Noped right out of that one. Oh, and we weren't in high school. We are in our 30s. She was a one-upper. No matter how long of a day I've had, hers was longer. Her schoolwork was harder. Her back pain was worse. I went to Tennessee, she went to 11 UC.
What is the weirdest thing your teacher has made you do? High school, I was 14. Knock at the door of my classroom. I knew immediately who it was but didn't expect anything. It was the assistant superintendent of Jefferson County, Louisville KY, school district, an older man who was a really nice guy and a little playful. He had been a principal and had simply stayed on as the school system grew. Is Louis in this class? Yes. I went to the hall with all my books and the two of us went to Frankfort KY in the county car with me driving. Driving age in KY is 16. I was a tech nerd and the place we went was a source for military surplus which the school system used quite creatively to save money. $1 for an aluminum pole that was part of a $5,000 antenna was used for fence posts since they looked nice and it was cheaper than a real post. Had a nice day and returned to school at closing. What about my parents? It was okay. My mom was a teacher in that school system. He was my mom's boss. I knew him well. The only person upset was me. I thought he might get into trouble for letting me drive the school's car. He said, "Let me worry about that." I then remembered that he taught driver's ed for 22 years.